It begins with fireworks, the kind of affection that sweeps you off your feet, makes your heart race, and rewrites the story you thought you knew about yourself. Suddenly, someone is everywhere in your life. Their attention is intoxicating. Their words are honey, their promises gold, their gestures larger than life. You are showered with affection, gifts, overwhelming praise. For the first time in a long time, you feel special, seen, worthy. But beneath the flood of adoration, a dangerous illusion is forming, one where love is a mirage and devotion becomes a trap. This is the phenomenon of love bombing. It's not just flattery or romance. It is a calculated, overwhelming campaign to capture your loyalty, distort your sense of self, and quietly steer your purpose to serve someone else's needs. In the beginning, you don't see the trap. You only feel the warmth, the validation you've secretly craved, the attention you never dared to expect, the hope that maybe, just maybe, you have finally found your soulmate, your purpose, your place. But psychology teaches us that when affection comes in tidal waves, when praise is relentless, when gifts arrive faster than you can unwrap them, your boundaries begin to blur. Love bombing targets the very core of your identity. Compliments are designed to fill the gaps left by old wounds. Devotion answers your need for belonging. Every gesture, every word, is an echo chamber that magnifies your longing for acceptance. You become addicted to the rush, to the feeling of being chosen. Research into emotional manipulation reveals that the human mind is vulnerable to this kind of barrage. The reward centers in your brain light up with every compliment, every message, every grand gesture. Like any powerful drug, the affection is both thrilling and numbing. It distracts you from red flags, silences your doubts, and slowly detaches you from your own judgment. The person bombarding you with love is always one step ahead, mirroring your dreams, finishing your sentences, making you feel like you were made for each other. You are not falling in love. You are being rewritten. In history, love bombing has been used by cults and authoritarian leaders to capture and control. New members are overwhelmed with praise, inclusion, and gifts until their former selves dissolve into the group's identity. In abusive relationships, love bombing is the first act in a play that leads to control, isolation, and eventually, emotional or even physical harm. The partner who once flooded you with love may later withdraw it, using your dependence as leverage. You stay, not because you are weak, but because your identity has been re-engineered to need their approval. Real stories echo this pattern. A woman, after months of intense romance, finds herself cut off from friends, doubting her own instincts, desperate for the affection that now comes only in unpredictable bursts. A man, after joining a charismatic organization, gives up his dreams, money, and autonomy, all for the love and praise that once made him feel alive. The moment you mistake adoration for truth, the mirage is complete. Your purpose is no longer your own. Why do we fall for the love-bombing mirage? Part of the answer lies in biology. Human beings are social creatures, wired for connection. We are vulnerable to affection because our brains are designed to reward attachment. Loneliness, insecurity, past trauma, these are open doors through which the love bomber slips in. They don't create your longing. They exploit it, weaponize it, and make you believe that without their love, you are nothing. But love bombing is not just about romance. It happens in families, workplaces, spiritual groups, anywhere someone needs to recruit your devotion. The formula is always the same: overwhelm with positivity, isolate from dissent, and then shift from worship to control. The victim is left confused, dependent, desperate to get back to the golden days of endless praise. The effects can be devastating. You begin to distrust your own perceptions, to question your memories, to see yourself only through the eyes of the one who bombarded you. Your boundaries become porous, your needs secondary, your doubts shameful. When the mirage fades, when the affection is withdrawn, you are left parched and disoriented, unsure of who you are without their validation. Healing from love bombing begins with recognizing the illusion. Real love is not overwhelming. It does not drown you. It lets you breathe. It allows you to hold on to your boundaries, your friends, your past. It invites disagreement, honors your autonomy, gives space for your truth. If someone's affection makes you feel dependent, if their praise isolates you from your life, if you feel that your purpose is only to keep their love alive, then you are not in love. You are in the desert, chasing a mirage. Therapists urge those who have suffered love bombing to reconnect with their authentic selves. Remember your values before the flood. Rekindle friendships that once anchored you. Create space for your own desires, your own disappointments, your own dreams. Learn to tolerate loneliness, not as a punishment, but as a sacred space where your true self can re-emerge. Practice skepticism about praise that comes too quickly, affection that drowns your doubts, gifts that arrive with invisible strings. The love-bombing Mirage is powerful because it promises to fill the emptiness at the core of being human. But no amount of adoration can substitute for genuine self-love, honest connection, and mutual respect. When you see through the illusion, you become free, not just from the manipulator, but from the belief that you need to be flooded with praise to be worthy of love. In the end, devotion is not about losing yourself in someone else's spotlight. True love is the slow, steady light by which you see yourself more clearly. Not as someone else's fantasy, but as the living, breathing, imperfect miracle that you are. Isolation through belonging. Sometimes, loneliness doesn't feel like emptiness, it feels like belonging. It happens so quietly you barely notice. You start out surrounded by people, family, friends, the scattered network of your old life. Then you find a group, a cause, a team, a circle of friends, maybe a lover's tribe, who feels like home in ways nothing else ever has. They speak your language, laugh at your jokes, share your wounds and secrets. At first, you feel more alive, more seen than ever before. You belong, and the ache of the outsider finally quiets. But as days pass, belonging becomes a gravity, pulling you further from the world you once knew. You don't see it coming, the slow, soft isolation that hides inside the warmth of connection. At first, it's just small things. You cancel on old friends because your new group needs you. Family gatherings feel tedious, so you make excuses, promising to visit next time. Inside the group, you are heard, valued, important. Outside, you start to feel misunderstood, out of step. Even your memories change color. Old relationships seem less relevant, your former self a faded photograph. Bit by bit, you surrender your former life for the comfort of fitting in. What you don't realize is that every step toward deeper connection, if unchecked, can become a step away from the wider world. Isolation creeps in, disguised as loyalty. It happens everywhere. In cults, it's a strategy. Outsiders become threats. The group becomes your only true family. But it's subtler in everyday life. The tightly knit workplace, the exclusive friend group, the activist cause, the online fandom or political tribe. What begins as solidarity grows into a silent contract. If you want to belong, you must belong only here. There are jokes you can't share outside, beliefs you're expected to defend, doubts you must hide. They wouldn't understand, you tell yourself. They're not like us. The circle closes tighter. Soon, you start to filter yourself even when you're alone. Your social media, your reading, your opinions, all curated to maintain your standing in the group. Dissent becomes dangerous. Difference is risky. You sense, consciously or not, that approval is conditional. Laugh at the wrong joke, question the wrong rule, and you might find yourself on the outside looking in. So, you learn to police yourself, to preemptively agree, to let go of parts of yourself that don't fit the mold. You might still see your old friends and family, but it feels different. Awkward, tense, as if you're visiting a country where you once belonged, but no longer speak the language. There's a growing impatience with those who don't get it, a low-level contempt or pity for anyone outside the fold. At home, at dinner, in quiet moments, you notice a distance has grown. You share less, listen less, trust less. Your real home, your true family, is now the group. If you're honest, the thought of losing their acceptance is terrifying, more terrifying than losing anyone else. The group's love is intoxicating, but it has a cost. Your world shrinks to fit its walls. It can feel almost spiritual. Psychologists call it identity fusion, when your sense of self merges so tightly with a group or cause that you'd do anything for it, even things you'd never consider alone. You adopt their values, their dreams, even their fears. You become a guardian of the group's boundaries, enforcing them on others and on yourself. It feels like protection, but it's really a defense against loneliness, the fear that outside the group, you're nothing. But deep inside, something else stirs. A faint nostalgia for the person you used to be, for the friends who knew you before you changed. Maybe you miss the freedom of not having to agree, the comfort of being understood in your native language. Sometimes, when you're alone, the group's echo grows faint and the old ache returns, but you push it down. The price of belonging is too high to risk it all for a taste of independence. Over time, the group's approval becomes the currency of your self-worth. You feel safe as long as you're in the inner circle, anxious when you're not. When someone leaves or is pushed out, you tell yourself they never really fit, but part of you wonders if you could be next. You're caught in a paradox. The place that promised to end your loneliness has become the condition of your isolation. You belong, but only here. And if belonging is ever threatened, the terror is sharper than any solitude you ever felt before. This isn't just a story of cults or closed societies. It's a pattern repeated everywhere. Look at the way political groups turn on traitors. Friend circles ostracize the one who breaks the code. Companies shun whistleblowers. Movements exile the insufficiently devoted. You see it in families where secrets must be kept, in classrooms where difference is policed, in religions where questioning is heresy. Isolation through belonging is the trapdoor hidden inside every tribe, every cause, every love affair that asks you to give up the rest of your world. But there is hope, if you know where to look. True belonging isn't about shrinking your world, but expanding it. It's the freedom to be fully yourself in every room, to carry the warmth of connection without letting it become a wall. It's knowing you can love your group without losing your voice, that you can disagree and still belong, that you can step outside and return, welcomed as you are. Real connection is a bridge, not a cell. It begins with awareness, seeing the lines you've drawn, the walls you've built. Ask yourself, what parts of me have I left behind to fit in? Who have I stopped calling? What ideas have I silenced? What doubts have I hidden? Do I belong here, or am I only safe here? In the answers, you may find the key to your own freedom. In the end, the deepest loneliness is not the absence of people, but the absence of yourself. If you find that belonging has become a kind of exile, remember, you are allowed to reclaim the parts of you that got left behind. The world is bigger than any one group, and you are bigger than any one belonging. You can walk back across the bridge, bringing all of yourself home. Guilt injection, ritual. You wake up every morning with a faint sense of unease. Maybe you don't even notice it at first. A slight heaviness in your chest, a hesitation before you speak, an urge to second-guess every choice. It's not always fear or sadness, but something quieter, more corrosive. It's the slow seep of guilt injected into your sense of self by people who learned long ago how to make you doubt your own moral compass. This is the guilt injection ritual, a silent ceremony that calibrates your morality to the judgments of those in power, until you can't tell the difference between what is right and what is merely allowed. You grow up learning rules, but not just the ones written down. There are glances and raised eyebrows, sudden silences after you speak, sighs of disappointment that linger longer than any punishment. In every family, every school, every community, there are leaders, parents, teachers, bosses, priests, gurus, who know the ritual by heart. They don't have to shout or threaten. Instead, they perfect the art of the subtle nudge, the careful injection of shame, the way a single phrase can make you shrink inside yourself. Is that what you're wearing? Should you really say that? I thought you were better than this. Their words settle into your bones, rewiring your sense of right and wrong, not by reason, but by reaction. The ritual doesn't end with childhood. In the adult world, bosses praise the silent, punish the bold, with a glance or an awkward silence. Social circles enforce unwritten codes with rolling eyes, inside jokes, cold shoulders. Religious and political leaders speak in parables and warnings, weaving guilt into every ceremony, every speech, every moment you hope to belong. The message is the same. Your instincts are suspect. Your desires dangerous. Your heart in need of guidance. Morality is not an inner light, but a mirror, constantly adjusted to reflect the moods of those above you. Psychologists have studied the power of social shame. In classic experiments, people will deny what they see with their own eyes, misidentifying shapes, colors, even truths about themselves, if enough others in the room seem to disagree. It's not logic that bends them, but the fear of being cast out, marked as different, judged unworthy. Leaders know this. They don't have to control your actions directly. They need only to control your sense of guilt and belonging, to become the hidden standard by which you judge every move. History is littered with grand examples of the guilt injection ritual. Entire societies have been steered by leaders who made shame a communal affair. Public confessions, forced apologies, ritual humiliations, or acts of penance designed not to heal, but to remind everyone of the cost of disobedience. The medieval church branded sinners, made them parade through streets. Totalitarian regimes held public denunciations, where families were forced to confess the sins of their loved ones. Even today, cancel culture and viral outrage work in similar ways, turning guilt and shame into a tool for shaping morality, sometimes with little care for truth or forgiveness. But it is the everyday ritual, the constant drip of micro-shames, that shapes your inner world most profoundly. You learn to monitor yourself with the eyes of the leader always watching. You feel guilt for things you never did, shame for thoughts you never acted upon. Even your kindness becomes suspect. Are you generous or just seeking approval? Are you honest or just afraid of punishment? The boundary between your own morality and the expectations of power dissolves, leaving you adrift. Consider how you hesitate to speak an unpopular opinion, not because it is wrong, but because you can already feel the collective disapproval. Or the way you apologize for things that require no apology. Your body, your accent, your laugh, your very presence, just because someone once told you it was too much. The guilt is no longer attached to an action, but to your existence. Leaders need only plant the seed. You do the rest, tending it every day, pruning yourself into something smaller, safer, easier to manage. Sometimes, the guilt injection ritual is so subtle that you defend it. You tell yourself you are being responsible, considerate, mature. But if you look closely, you'll see how your inner compass has been magnetized, spinning not toward true north, but toward the shifting desires of whoever holds power in the room. You become hyper-attuned to reactions, reading every frown, every pause, every sigh as a signal to recalibrate. Morality becomes a performance, an endless audition for approval that never comes. But the most dangerous part of the ritual is how it spreads. Once you've internalized the guilt, you begin to inject it into others. Parents pass it to children, teachers to students, managers to employees. You may find yourself scolding a friend for being selfish, when really they are just refusing to play by the inherited rules. You withhold praise, dole out disappointment, enforce silence, all in the name of keeping order. The ritual persists, generation after generation, a chain of guilt so long that no one remembers who started it. Can you escape the ritual? The first step is noticing it, naming the ways your sense of right and wrong is shaped by reactions, not by conscience. Ask yourself, whose approval am I seeking? Whose disappointment am I so desperate to avoid? When you feel a sudden wash of guilt, pause and question. Does this guilt belong to me, or was it planted? Is this my voice, or just an echo of someone else's disapproval? You may not be able to silence the ritual completely. The world is built on invisible systems of belonging and control, but with awareness, you can start to reclaim your morality. You can choose to act from conviction, not from fear. You can learn to sit with disapproval, to trust your own sense of kindness, honesty, courage, and, most importantly, you can refuse to inject guilt into others, breaking the chain one breath at a time. The guilt injection ritual is ancient, powerful, and quiet. It shapes your days in ways you rarely notice, calibrating your heart to the beat of someone else's drum. But you are not condemned to play this role forever. Every moment you choose your own compass over another's reaction, you rewrite the ritual, reclaiming the story of who you are and how you decide what is right. Fear of outer world. Imagine waking up in a world where the edges of reality are marked not by physical walls, but by fear. An invisible fence of dread and suspicion that grows tighter every day. The sun might rise outside your window, but in your mind, daylight doesn't bring freedom. It only reminds you how dangerous the outside is supposed to be. Out there, beyond your group, your family, your faith, your cult, there is nothing but chaos, evil, temptation, and betrayal. You've been told the story 1,000 times. Everything outside is poisoned, corrupted, lost. Only here, only close to the leader, are you truly safe. The fear of the outer world doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, drip by drip. At first, it's a warning. Be careful. The world is full of temptation, sin, and enemies. Then the stories pile up. Tales of people who left and were destroyed, who vanished, who were never seen again, or who came back broken and hollow. News from the outside is filtered, twisted, recast, as proof that evil always triumphs out there. When disaster strikes anywhere in the world, it's used as a lesson. See what happens when people stray. Every crime, every accident, every heartbreak becomes a sign. Soon you don't need the warnings. The fear has taken root in you, and you repeat it yourself. There is an art to this manipulation. The leader or inner circle knows exactly how to stir dread and loyalty in the same breath. They don't have to lock the doors. They simply make the world outside sound so poisonous that you stop dreaming of escape. A strange car on the road becomes a threat. A new neighbor is a spy. A letter from a former friend is a lure, a trap. Even your own thoughts are suspect. If you start to wonder about the outside, you wonder what's wrong with you. The fear is fed every day, in subtle ways. Maybe it's a sermon about the dangers of outsiders, or a rule forbidding you to read certain books, watch certain movies, talk to certain people. Maybe it's an older member's cautionary tale told in hushed tones. I knew someone who left. They ended up in jail, or worse. The message is always the same. Without us, you are lost. Without the leader, you are nothing. The boundary between inside and outside grows sharper. Where once you saw friends, strangers, and distant family as fellow travelers, now they're seen as enemies, obstacles, or lost sheep. Holidays, traditions, foods, even the way people dress or laugh, all become clues, signs that the outer world is tainted. You begin to fear not just for yourself, but for your loved ones. If they stray, you feel panic. If they ask questions, you feel anger. The group's fear becomes your own. Psychologists call this bounded choice, a reality where your freedom is an illusion because every option outside the cult is painted in the blackest colors. You become grateful for small mercies inside the group. Praise, comfort, a sense of belonging. These are given to you in small doses, always with a warning. Don't risk losing this. Don't even think about the door. Over time, your memories shift. You start to doubt your own experience. The good things you once knew outside blur into the background. Your brain highlights every story of pain, every whispered rumor about outsiders, every tale of ruin. Even when the group hurts you, takes your money, controls your life, punishes your doubts, you're told it's for your own good. The world is so much worse. Your suffering is a test, a badge of belonging. This fear shapes your very language. Words like apostate, sinner, heretic, or traitor become poison. You learn not to say them, not to think them, not even to ask why they matter so much. The leader's voice is the only voice that feels safe. You measure every thought, every feeling against what you've been taught. Your dreams shrink, your world contracts, until the only light you know is the one they provide. People on the outside cannot understand why you stay. They say, "Why don't you just leave?" But they cannot see the invisible cage. To leave would mean stepping into an abyss, a world full of monsters, loneliness, and meaninglessness. Everything you are has been tied to the group. Even your doubts feel like evidence of your own weakness. The outside is not just unknown, it is terrifying. Sometimes the cracks begin to show. Maybe you see someone escape and survive. Maybe a secret message, a forbidden book. A moment of kindness from an outsider starts to unravel the stories you've been told. Doubt is dangerous, but it is also the first light. Even then, the fear doesn't vanish. It becomes a voice inside you, warning you that every step away is a step toward destruction. The greatest cruelty of the fear of the outer world is not the lies you were told, but the dreams you are made to surrender. Every possibility, every alternate life, every piece of your own soul that doesn't fit the script, all of it is packed away, locked up, lost to the demands of safety. You might tell yourself you're content, but in quiet moments, the fear becomes a question. What if everything you know is just a story, built to keep you in place? If you do find the courage to step outside, the world doesn't rush in all at once. At first, it feels alien, too bright, too loud, too strange. You expect disaster at every corner, watch for the doom you were promised, but slowly the grip loosens. You meet people who don't fit the stories. You see acts of kindness, moments of beauty, glimmers of a life you never knew you were missing. The fear doesn't disappear, but it begins to fade, replaced by curiosity. Then hope. For those still trapped, the leader's voice is the only sun. The world outside is always storm, always night, always waiting to destroy you if you wander too far. And so, your world shrinks to a single safe zone, bordered not by walls, but by stories, by tales of danger, sin, and doom. The real prison is built of fear, and the key, hidden deep within, is the courage to doubt, to wonder, to imagine that freedom could be real. For as long as the fear of the outer world rules your life, the leader's voice is not just safe, it is everything you know. You're told that confession will set you free, that healing begins the moment you speak your truth out loud, expose the secret you've been hiding in the shadows, and sometimes this is true. But what if, in your most vulnerable moment, the act of confession doesn't liberate you, but binds you tighter? What if, instead of release, you find yourself quietly cataloged, your secrets stored, your soul slowly brought under someone else's control? In the name of healing, you bare yourself, believing you'll find safety. But confession, in the wrong hands, becomes a chain, a subtle system of surveillance, a map of your fears, a ledger of your shame. It starts innocently enough. Maybe you're in a therapist's office, or a confessional booth, or a support group where honesty is currency. You're encouraged to share your story, to spill the things you've never spoken, the wounds, the betrayals, the unspoken longings that make you feel most exposed. You are told this is how you will be understood, accepted, forgiven. And at first you feel lighter. You feel seen, maybe for the first time. But not all who listen are neutral. Sometimes the listener is not just a witness, but a gatekeeper. Someone with the power to grant or withhold belonging, redemption, or absolution. In some religious traditions, confession isn't just between you and the divine. It's recorded, remembered, sometimes written in private ledgers, sometimes whispered in back rooms. The priest, the elder, the spiritual guide, they become custodians of your guilt. The more you confess, the more they know exactly where to touch, to wound, to warn. What you thought would be healing becomes a subtle contract. You are now defined by what you've revealed. This dynamic is not limited to religion. Cults, extremist groups, even some corporate organizations use confession as a method of control. During cleansing rituals, group therapy, onboarding interviews, you are encouraged to reveal your faults, your darkest moments. The process is dressed up as care, helping you integrate, grow, or fit in. But behind the scenes, your confessions are cataloged, cross-referenced, remembered. The group now holds your most private vulnerabilities in their hands. You may not realize it yet, but you have handed them the keys to your obedience, because the knowledge of your secret isn't neutral, it is power. If you rebel, threaten to leave, or even question authority, the threat is unspoken but ever present. We know you. We know what you did, what you fear, where you're weak. Sometimes it's explicit. Blackmail, threats, shame. More often, it's just a quiet pressure. An understanding that you could be exposed, humiliated, or cast out if you step out of line. The group's acceptance becomes conditional, and you find yourself performing, submitting, obeying, not because you believe, but because you are afraid. Even in secular contexts, this dynamic persists. In some forms of therapy or coaching, a so-called breakthrough is not the end, but the beginning of dependence. The person who knows your most tender places now has leverage. Advice laced with subtle manipulation, loyalty bought with the currency of your own story. You are told you are empowered, but the truth is that you are being managed, guided along tracks that benefit someone else. The wound you revealed becomes a lever that moves you, silently and persistently, toward compliance. History is full of examples. In totalitarian regimes, forced confessions are used to create records of guilt. Evidence not just of crime, but of loyalty to the system. People are made to admit things they never did, to implicate themselves and others, to give the state a permanent hold over them. Once the confession is on file, obedience is assured. Dissent becomes almost impossible because the cost is exposure, public shame, prison, or worse. The mere act of confession makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is a form of currency in the economy of power. But it doesn't have to be dramatic to be dangerous. Sometimes the control is woven into daily life. A parent demanding secrets in the name of trust, a partner fishing for past wrongs, a boss extracting confessions about weakness or ambition. all in the name of support. You are told to be honest, to open up, to make yourself known. But you sense deep down that your words are being stored, sorted, ready to be used, not always to help, but to remind you who holds the power. The cruelest part is that confession does feel good at first. The burden lifts, the loneliness softens, but the relief can become an addiction, and the process becomes a trap. The more you confess, the more you are defined by what you've done or what you fear, rather than what you hope to become. You become obedient not to your own conscience, but to the gaze of those who listen and remember. Fear replaces guilt as the engine of your behavior. Yet, the solution isn't silence. Genuine healing, real freedom, requires honesty. First with yourself, then with those who have truly earned your trust. But beware those who rush to collect your secrets, who insist on confession as the only path to belonging. Healthy connection is rooted in choice, in reciprocity, in boundaries. When confession is freely given and met with respect, it can heal. When it is demanded, archived, or wielded as leverage, it is a weapon. So the next time you are asked to bare your soul, pause. Ask yourself, who benefits from my confession? Who holds the ledger? Who will protect my story if I change, if I rebel, if I need to walk away? Your secrets are sacred. In the wrong hands, they can be turned against you, used to bind you to systems, people, or beliefs that no longer serve you. Confession can be a path to freedom, but sometimes, in the name of healing, you become a prisoner of your own honesty, chained not by what you did, but by who heard it, and what they do with your truth. Choose wisely whose hands you place your story in, for it may be the most powerful thing you ever give away. Identity-stripping doctrine. There's a point where the world stops asking who you are and begins to tell you. It happens slowly, almost invisibly. A name taken, a garment changed, a ritual enforced, a belief forbidden. You think it's just adaptation, a necessary surrender to belong. But what's happening is deeper, more insidious. Your old names, clothes, and beliefs are not simply abandoned. They are stripped away, layer by layer, not to free you, but to rewire you. You are being made into a vessel, loyal, programmable, and emptied of the self you once called your own. This is the identity-stripping doctrine, a technique as old as civilization, practiced in every era by those who seek not just obedience, but possession. Throughout history, conquering armies, authoritarian states, cults, and even mainstream societies have mastered the art of erasing personal identity and replacing it with something pliable, something useful, something safe. The process often begins with names. Names are more than labels. They're anchors to family, heritage, memory. When a regime takes your name, assigns you a number, or demands you adopt a new one, it's not an accident. It's the first incision in the surgery of the soul. Enslaved people, prisoners, and orphans have long been renamed by those in power, their old selves made into ghosts, their new identities stamped by authority. Then come the clothes, uniforms, robes, even forced nudity. These are not just dress codes, but weapons. Stripping you of your chosen clothes strips away your autonomy, your self-expression, your history. In boarding schools that targeted indigenous children, traditional garments were burned and replaced with institutional uniforms. The message was clear. The person you were is gone. You will now be what we decide. Beliefs follow. You are told what to worship, what to reject, what to doubt. Books are banned, rituals forbidden, language is silenced. In religious cults, military boot camps, and political re-education camps, doctrine is repeated, tested, enforced. Doubt is not tolerated. Questions are shamed or punished. Every day, a bit more of your inner world is scraped away. You may resist at first, clinging to private prayers or forbidden memories. But the relentless pressure, the need for safety or approval, the fear of being singled out, all conspire to dissolve your inner defenses. Psychologists call this totalistic social control. The system is designed to overwhelm, to confuse, to exhaust. Deprived of your old identity, you become dependent on your new masters for meaning, purpose, even reality itself. Stockholm Syndrome, brainwashing, thought reform, all are variations on this theme. Strip away the old, install the new, reward compliance, punish dissent. Consider the stories from history. In the Soviet gulags, prisoners were addressed only by number. In the Khmer Rouge's Cambodia, even nicknames were forbidden. The past was to be erased, the future owned by the party. In cults like Jonestown or the Children of God, members were made to confess their past sins, to sever ties with family, to adopt new names, new language, new rules. The process was always presented as liberation, a shedding of falsehood and ego. But in reality, it was a soft annihilation. You were being emptied, hollowed out, prepared for programming. Even in modern life, echoes of identity stripping linger. Fraternities, sororities, elite military units, exclusive clubs, all use rituals of humiliation, uniformity, and confession to break down the old and build up the new. In the workplace, you may be told to bring your whole self, but only if that self aligns perfectly with the corporate brand, the unspoken rules, the demands of the culture. Technology has created new avenues for this doctrine. Social media profiles flatten your complexity into curated images, hashtags, and trending opinions. The algorithm rewards those who conform, punishes those who dissent. Over time, you may notice your wardrobe, your opinions, your language shifting to match the digital crowd. You tell yourself it's evolution, but sometimes it's just the slow erasure of difference, the gentle reprogramming of self. The effects of identity stripping are profound. At first, you may feel relief, a shedding of old burdens, a sense of belonging, even euphoria at being part of something larger than yourself. But gradually, the cost reveals itself. Creativity withers. Doubt gnaws. The world grows smaller, your choice is more narrow. You become reactive, loyal, eager to please, afraid of being cast out. Your soul aches for authenticity, but you no longer know what that means. Survivors of cults, high-control groups, or even strict families describe the same feeling, waking up one day and realizing they no longer recognize themselves. Memories blur. The voice inside feels distant or muted. Rebuilding takes years, a painstaking process of reclaiming old names, resurrecting forbidden dreams, learning to trust your own perceptions again. But there is hope. The self, while fragile, is also stubborn. Even in the harshest conditions, a spark remains. An old song, a childhood nickname, a secret belief kept alive in darkness. Resistance is possible, sometimes in tiny ways. A hidden diary, a whispered prayer, a private act of defiance. Recovery begins with remembering who you were, what you loved, what made you different. The process is slow, painful, but deeply human. As you listen, ask yourself, which parts of your identity have you surrendered, and to whom? What have you been asked to strip away, and what did you give willingly? Where have you mistaken conformity for freedom, or belonging for love? The answers may be unsettling, but in asking, you take the first step back from the doctrine and toward your own unruly self. In the end, you are more than a vessel. You are more than the roles assigned to you, the beliefs imposed upon you, the uniforms forced over your skin. The world will always try to strip, shape, and program. But beneath it all, your true name waits, unbroken, unbowed, quietly calling you home. Random reward scheduling. Have you ever wondered why the smallest approval, a compliment, a like, a nod from someone in charge, can feel so addictive? Why you keep checking your phone for a reply, hoping for that hit of validation, even when you know it shouldn't matter? The answer lies in a truth that runs deeper than willpower or self-esteem. It's a pattern older than civilization, baked into the very circuits of your brain. Random reward scheduling. Picture a casino. The lights flash, the slot machines whir, coins rattle down into the tray, sometimes. Not every time, and not on any schedule you can predict. You pull the lever, heart pounding, sometimes nothing, sometimes a small win. The uncertainty is everything. It's the anticipation, the not knowing, that wires your attention so tightly to the game. You become willing to play just one more round, even as you lose track of time, of money, of what drew you in to begin with. Now step outside the casino, into the everyday world. You might think you've left the games behind, but the same mechanics operate in your social life, your work, your relationships, especially in any environment run by someone whose approval you crave. This is random reward scheduling at its most insidious. Validation and love delivered unpredictably, keeping your mind hungry for the next hit, always chasing the next small high from a leader's nod or a partner's rare praise. Psychologists have studied this effect for decades. In the 1950s, researcher B.F. Skinner discovered that animals, rats, pigeons, even humans, are far more likely to persist in a behavior if rewards come at random intervals rather than every time. Give a rat a treat for every lever press, and it quickly loses interest once the rewards stop. But give the treat at unpredictable times, and the rat will keep pressing, sometimes frantically, long after the treats are gone. This is called variable ratio reinforcement, the most powerful form of conditioning known to science. It hijacks the brain's dopamine system, turning even small, uncertain rewards into irresistible hooks. And this isn't just about gambling. Think about your phone. Every swipe, every scroll, every notification is a potential reward. A message, a like, a bit of good news. Most of the time, nothing special happens, but occasionally you hit the jackpot. A compliment, a funny meme, a heartfelt message. The randomness is the hook. Your brain learns to crave the anticipation, the possibility that the next glance will bring something good. The same dynamic shapes our lives in groups, especially where validation is scarce and power is concentrated. In cults, organizations, even tight friend groups, the leader becomes the slot machine. Praise, affection, even basic acknowledgement are doled out unpredictably. You can never be sure when it will come or what will trigger it. One day your efforts are noticed and celebrated. The next, you're ignored or criticized for the same behavior. The rules are unclear, the rewards inconsistent. And so, you work harder. You become hyper-attuned to every signal, scanning for clues, tweaking your words, your appearance, your emotions, all in the hope of that next small win. The result? A subtle, relentless addiction to approval. You may tell yourself you're above it, that you're self-reliant, but somewhere deep in your nervous system, you're wired to seek out those little bursts of validation, even from people whose respect you're not sure you even want. Your boss gives you a rare compliment, and you replay it in your mind for days. A group leader smiles at you across the room, and suddenly you feel invincible, until the next meeting, when you're invisible again, and the cycle of craving resumes. This pattern can be devastating in relationships. A partner who alternates between affection and coldness becomes the emotional slot machine, keeping you hooked by delivering love unpredictably. One night, they're attentive, texting you sweet nothings, making you feel seen. The next, they're distant, distracted, or dismissive. You tell yourself you don't care, but you wait up for a message, comb through memories for signs of what you did right or wrong. You become addicted not to the person, but to the unpredictability of their love. Children learn this pattern early. A parent whose attention arrives at random, sometimes engaged, sometimes absent, sometimes loving, sometimes harsh, teaches the child to anxiously anticipate, to work ever harder for affection that may or may not arrive. This is how random reward scheduling shapes not just behavior, but personality, and even identity. You grow into an adult always chasing that next uncertain high, defining your worth by the reactions of others. And in the digital age, the world amplifies the effect. Social media is engineered around random rewards, notifications, follows, comments arriving unpredictably, never quite enough, never entirely absent. You keep checking, hoping, craving, rarely satisfied. You scroll endlessly, always convinced the next post will deliver what you seek. The casino is now in your pocket and the game never ends. Is there any escape from this cycle? The first step is seeing it clearly. Notice when your mood rises and falls, not from your own actions, but from the unpredictable feedback of others. Notice the small highs, the way your heart jumps at a compliment, your spirits drop at being ignored. Ask yourself, who is the slot machine in my life? Where have I confused love or validation with random, inconsistent rewards? Breaking free means reclaiming your attention. It means learning to recognize the difference between genuine connection and the addictive thrill of unpredictable approval. It means asking for clarity in relationships, refusing to dance for rewards that never come, or come only when it's convenient for someone else. It means building your own sources of meaning and self-worth, so you're not always playing someone else's game. You'll never eliminate the allure of random rewards. They're part of being human. But you can stop living at the mercy of someone else's schedule. You can choose to step out of the casino, out of the hunger for a leader's nod, and into a life where you decide what is enough. So next time you find yourself chasing validation, refreshing the feed, waiting for the message, replaying a compliment. Ask yourself, is this real connection or just the dopamine drip of random reward? The answer might be the first step to freedom. Thought-stopping commands. There are moments when your mind whispers a forbidden question, a sudden doubt, a flicker of uncertainty, a stray curiosity that threatens to disturb the order of things. Maybe you wonder if the rules you follow are really just, if the leaders you trust are truly honest, if the beliefs you've carried all your life are as solid as they seemed yesterday. But before the thought can bloom, before it can unravel the tightly woven fabric of your reality, you stop it. Sometimes with a mantra, sometimes with a prayer, sometimes with a punishment you barely recognize as such. This is the regime of thought-stopping commands, where doubt is treated like poison and the mind is trained to snuff it out before it can ever ignite a revolution inside you. From the outside, it's hard to see the mechanisms at work, but for those inside, those raised in strict families, fundamentalist religions, cults, even the relentless machinery of modern self-help culture, the ritual is unmistakable. A negative thought appears, and you respond by repeating a chant. Don't question, just believe. Or you whisper a sacred phrase, rub a talisman, recite a verse, focus on your breathing, or even slap your wrist with a rubber band. Anything to drown out the heresy. You learn to treat skepticism as a disease, curiosity as a weakness, doubt as a sin. Psychologists first gave a name to this pattern. After studying groups where total mental control was the goal, they noticed that members would deploy automatic thought-stopping techniques whenever faced with internal contradiction or external criticism. The brain, they realized, can be trained like a dog, to flinch at disobedience, to self-correct at the first sign of mental rebellion. In its most extreme form, you become your own jailer, policing your thoughts more ruthlessly than any outside authority ever could. It often starts in childhood. The moment you question a rule, a parent's voice thunders, "Don't talk back." The first time you express doubt in a religious setting, the elders warn you, "Those who doubt are lost." Schools too have their mantras. "Because I said so," "Respect authority," "Don't ask so many questions." Each command is a brick in the invisible wall built around your mind, teaching you to equate uncertainty with danger, rebellion with pain. As you grow, the commands become internalized. You scold yourself for thinking wrong thoughts. You recite affirmations to drown out anxiety. I am strong, I am grateful, I am focused. Positive perhaps, but sometimes used to club dissent into silence, to smother complexity, to erase the uncomfortable questions that might lead to real growth. The difference between genuine self-encouragement and thought-stopping is subtle, but the effect is profound. One is a hand reaching out to guide, the other is a hand clamped over your mouth. The world is full of institutions that depend on thought-stopping commands to survive. Cults teach elaborate rituals, chanting, meditation, repetitive labor, to short-circuit critical thinking. High-control political movements demand loyalty oaths and group chants until the ability to doubt is nearly extinguished. Even workplaces, with their slogans and relentless positivity, can create environments where questioning the status quo is an act of sabotage, punished not with violence, but with exile, ridicule, or missed opportunities. Modern life has its own version of thought-stopping, endless distraction. The moment an uncomfortable thought arises, you reach for your phone, scroll through a feed, plug into music or a podcast, anything to escape the silence where doubt might take root. You learn to fear your own mind. Stillness becomes a threat, a moment to be filled, a void to be sealed shut with noise. And yet, doubt is not poison. Doubt is the engine of growth, the birthplace of wisdom. Every discovery, every invention, every act of courage began as a question someone was brave enough to let live. The rituals that stop thoughts may keep you safe for a while, but they also keep you small. The chants that erase your doubt also erase your capacity for wonder, for genuine connection, for change. You see it most clearly in the moments when the commands fail, when the mantra loses its magic, when the old punishments lose their sting, when the doubt returns stronger than before. Maybe you wake in the middle of the night, the question pulsing in your mind, is this really who I am? Is this really true? The fear is sharp, but so is the possibility. If you allow the thought to breathe, to stretch, to speak, you risk everything. But you also invite freedom. Recovery from a life of thought-stopping commands is slow and often painful. The mind, trained for years to see every question as a threat, resists. You might feel guilt, fear, even physical discomfort as you begin to let doubt surface. But with time, you discover a deeper truth. Your thoughts are not your enemy. Your doubts are not a poison to be purged, but a compass, a signal, a sign that your mind is alive and reaching for something more. You do not have to banish every doubt. You do not have to punish yourself for thinking dangerous things. The most radical act may be to simply notice the commands, to ask, where did I learn to silence myself? Who benefits if I never question? With each small act of defiance, letting a doubt live, exploring a forbidden question, refusing to punish your own mind, you reclaim a piece of yourself. The world is always waiting to teach you the next command, the next ritual, the next way to keep your mind small. But you have another option. Let your mind wander. Let your doubts speak. Let your questions be loud. In the end, the thoughts you dare to entertain are not the ones that destroy you, but the ones that free you to become more fully, fearlessly alive. Prophetic guilt, binding. Imagine growing up with a secret you never chose, a burden whispered into your life before you could even form words. From the very beginning, you are told that you are not like everyone else. You are special, chosen, marked, destined for something vast and holy that stretches beyond your own life. The people you trust the most, family, elders, leaders, echo the message again and again. You were picked out by fate, by God, by the universe itself, before you even drew your first breath. This isn't a compliment. It's a commandment sewn into your skin. Every action, every thought, every hesitation is weighed against a purpose you never set, a story that began before you were born and will end, maybe, only with the world itself. This is prophetic guilt binding, the binding of your identity, your freedom, your future to a cosmic script that brooks no deviation, no doubt, no escape. It is both flattery and threat, a gilded cage whose bars are invisible but absolute. In its grip, you live with the knowledge that failure isn't just personal, it is catastrophic. You are told that your disobedience could bring ruin not just to yourself, but to everyone you love, even to the fate of the world. The story is always the same. You are the linchpin, the hinge of history, the one holding everything together. If you break, everything breaks. The weight of this destiny is crushing. When you're praised, it's never just for what you've done. It's because you are fulfilling the prophecy. Every act of obedience, every sacrifice, every moment you put the group's needs above your own is not just good, it's cosmic. But the price of any slip, any rebellion, any moment of doubt is catastrophic guilt. The stakes are always sky high. One wrong step, one selfish thought, and the whole sacred project is at risk. From childhood, the message is drilled in. Sometimes it comes from Scripture, chosen before the world's foundation, set apart for a holy work. Sometimes it comes from family lore, or the whispered dreams of a parent who claims you were given a sign about your greatness. Your ordinary desires, play, rest, curiosity, disagreement, are quietly poisoned. You're taught to watch yourself, to measure each decision by its effect on the great plan. You might not understand the prophecy, or even believe it fully, but its logic seeps in, twisting your every choice. The guilt grows quietly, almost beautifully, as you age. You learn to see every hardship as a test, every failure as a betrayal of something much bigger than yourself. When you feel fear, you bury it. After all, the chosen don't get to be afraid. When you doubt, you double down, terrified that a single question will crack the destiny you're upholding. When you're exhausted or angry or lonely, you hide it, believing that your struggles endanger the mission. In the silence of your mind, guilt coils tighter with every passing year. Prophetic guilt binding thrives on isolation. No one outside the circle can truly understand what's at stake. You can't share your doubts, can't risk breaking the spell by speaking your fears aloud. Sometimes, you envy those with ordinary lives, whose mistakes are only their own. But your world shrinks to the size of your obligation. Every friend, every relationship, is measured by how it supports or threatens your role. You begin to mistrust your own instincts, second-guess your feelings, treat joy itself as a temptation that might lead you astray. Leaders, conscious or not, exploit this guilt with devastating skill. Praise comes laced with reminders of destiny. Don't forget, you were chosen for this. Warnings are cloaked in cosmic threat. If you fail, everything falls apart. Punishments, withdrawn affection, cold silences, subtle shame, are framed not as anger, but as disappointment in your inability to rise to your calling. Even love becomes conditional. We love you because you are the chosen one. Don't let us down. The binding is almost impossible to see from the inside. You might even feel pride at first for being so important. But that pride sours with every mistake. Every act of self-care feels like betrayal. Every personal dream, every wish for a different life, every act of self-assertion becomes a cosmic threat. You are chained not by violence, but by the unbearable weight of imagined consequence. The most dangerous part of prophetic guilt binding is that it builds a self-policing system. No one has to monitor you. You watch yourself relentlessly, policing your thoughts, your dreams, your impulses. Even if the leaders leave, even if you try to run, the guilt comes with you. A ghost in your heart, whispering, if you let go, everything you love will die. It's not just a fear of punishment. It's a terror of being the cause of cosmic failure, of letting down not just people, but destiny itself. Many never escape this loop. Some live entire lives ruled by it, their greatest acts of rebellion being small, secret pleasures carefully hidden from the light. Others burn out, their minds and bodies broken by the strain of carrying a burden too heavy for any one person. A few, if they're lucky, begin to question. They notice the double standard, the leader who demands sacrifice but never pays it themselves, the prophecy that always changes to fit the needs of those in charge, the love that is always conditional, always held hostage to obedience. If you are able to break free, the first thing you feel is not relief, but terror. Who are you if you're not the chosen one? What meaning does your life have if it isn't holding the universe together? The guilt does not vanish overnight. It clings, recasting every new act of freedom as selfishness, every new hope as a threat to the world. But slowly, day by day, you begin to feel the weight lift. You discover that love can be unconditional, that meaning can be made, not imposed. You learn to forgive yourself, not just for your mistakes, but for surviving the prophecy itself. Prophetic guilt binding is the most insidious of cages. It flatters while it enslaves. It makes obedience feel holy and doubt feel like murder. But no destiny, no prophecy, no cosmic plan can demand you sacrifice yourself forever. In the end, freedom is found not in fulfilling the script, but in daring to write your own story, guilt and all. And when you finally do, you discover a truth more powerful than prophecy, that you are enough, not because you were chosen, but because you choose yourself. Reality mirror distortion. You'd like to believe that truth is solid, that facts, once discovered, stand unshaken, immune to spin, manipulation, or wishful thinking. But human reality isn't built on raw fact. It's filtered, shaped, and ultimately reframed by those with the loudest voice, the highest status, or the most relentless repetition. What happens when those in power polish and distort the mirror of reality so persistently that truth itself begins to melt? When every fact is bent, blurred, or repainted, and soon, only the leader's version of events feels emotionally real, it starts quietly. A leader, a politician, a guru, or even a charismatic manager offers a new angle, a gentle reframing of a messy situation. That's not what happened, they insist. Let me explain. They speak with calm certainty, with practiced warmth, with just enough detail to sound plausible, and you want to believe them. It's easier, safer. Their version is simpler, more comfortable, less threatening than the chaos of contradictory facts. The emotional relief is real, and so, for a moment, is the story. But soon, the reframing becomes routine. Every mistake is painted as a learning experience, every failure as a misunderstood victory, every inconvenient fact as a smear campaign or a minor misunderstanding. The leader's voice becomes the soundtrack to reality. Disagreement isn't a difference of opinion, it's disloyalty. Skepticism isn't critical thinking, it's subversion. Gradually, the group learns to distrust their own eyes and ears. They turn to the leader to know what's real and what's not. This is the psychology of gaslighting writ large, scaled up from toxic relationships to entire organizations, communities, even nations. At first, the distortion feels minor, just a nudge, a reinterpretation. But repeated often enough, it takes on a new weight. Social psychologist Leon Festinger called it cognitive dissonance, the mental tension that arises when reality and group belief don't match. And in these moments, most people choose belonging over truth. If everyone else agrees, then perhaps you were mistaken. If the leader insists and punishes dissent, you quickly learn that questioning your own perception is safer than challenging theirs. History is littered with examples. In authoritarian regimes, reality is rewritten daily. Newspapers change headlines after publication. Photos are edited, records erased, inconvenient people made to disappear, not just from power, but from memory. The official story, no matter how implausible, becomes the only emotional anchor. Facts become fluid, nostalgia retrofitted. The past itself is updated, so that only the leader's story feels stable. Everything else is a dangerous, confusing mirage. But this doesn't only happen in dictatorships. It happens in families, in workplaces, in friend groups, anywhere that social pressure rewards agreement and punishes dissent. The charismatic boss who rewrites quarterly losses as strategic pivots. The head of a spiritual movement who reframes every failed prophecy as a lesson in faith. The family elder who insists on a sanitized version of events so that the family history is always one of harmony, never abuse, never neglect. The more this reality mirroring continues, the more your brain adapts. Neuroscientists call it memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall an event, your brain rewrites it, layering in new context, new emotions, new meanings. If the leader's version is repeated often enough, with enough social force, your original memory begins to fade. You doubt yourself. You begin to feel that their story is the real story because it's the only one that matches what everyone else is feeling and saying. The leader's narrative becomes not just the truth, but the truth that feels right. All other versions feel distant, unsettling, unreal. It's not stupidity or gullibility or weakness. It's a function of the human need to belong. Social pain, being outcast, mocked, or isolated, activates the same brain regions as physical pain. Most people would rather edit their memories than risk exile. Over time, your reality mirror warps. It reflects not what happened, but what you are told happened, over and over, until fact and fiction are fused. Sometimes, you notice the cracks, a feeling that something doesn't quite add up, a half-remembered detail that contradicts the leader's story. But these moments are fleeting, and the weight of consensus is strong. The group closes ranks. Doubt becomes dangerous. And so, the facts are smoothed away, the jagged edges of truth polished until only the approved version remains. The leader's account is no longer just emotionally real, it's all that's left. This is how entire societies rewrite their own past, how families erase inconvenient histories, how organizations spin stories to keep members loyal. What matters is not what actually happened, but what the group agrees to remember, and what the leader insists must be true. And once this system is in place, it becomes self-reinforcing. Anyone who breaks the spell, who tries to hold up the original mirror, is cast as an enemy, someone who threatens the fragile sense of reality that the group has built. Yet, in the quiet moments, alone with your thoughts, you may still sense the residue of what really happened, the shadow of the truth, the echo of a fact that won't quite die. This is the last line of defense against total distortion. The private, stubborn memory, the diary entry you never shared, the small voice inside that says, "I remember." But even this is hard to trust, after so much reframing, so much pressure, so many retellings. What do you do then? In a world where mirrors are warped and reality is rewritten with every speech, every meeting, every story, you remember that facts don't have feelings, but people do. That truth is rarely as comforting as a well-told lie, but only truth can truly free you. The leader's version of events may feel more emotionally real, more socially safe, but it is still a fiction, however beautiful or compelling. So you search for the fragments, the evidence, the contradictions, the moments of doubt. You hold on to your memory, even when it shakes. You look for others who remember too, and together you rebuild what was broken, bit by bit. Reality may bend, but it is never fully erased. Even in the most distorted mirrors, a sliver of the truth remains, waiting for someone brave enough to see it and say it out loud. Kindness with strings. You've always heard that kindness is a virtue. Give and you'll receive. Help others and goodness will circle back. But beneath the surface of every generous gesture, there's a system running quietly, keeping score, a ledger where every favor, every gift, every act of charity is noted and balanced. Eventually, help becomes a hook, and kindness is no longer an act of freedom, but a currency, a debt you are expected to repay. This is kindness with strings attached. We like to imagine that generosity is pure, unconditional, a gift given without hope or expectation of return. But history, psychology, and personal experience all tell a more complicated story. In almost every society, acts of generosity are not just about compassion. They are about obligation, leverage, social capital. The moment help is given, an invisible thread is tied between giver and receiver, a thread that can tighten, tangle, or strangle, depending on what comes next. This system is ancient, rooted deep in human evolution. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer tribes discovered that gift-giving was never simple charity. It was a binding force, a way to build alliances, share resources, and establish trust. But every gift came with an unspoken rule: reciprocate or risk exclusion. The receiver, even if grateful, carried a subtle burden, a debt that could not be ignored. Failing to repay was not just rude, it was dangerous, marking you as untrustworthy, selfish, outside the group. In medieval and early modern societies, this logic took on new forms. Nobles and kings bestowed favors, land, titles, money on their followers. But these were never free. Every act of royal generosity was a claim on loyalty, a chain that bound vassals to their lord. If you received a gift and refused to serve, you risked ruin, exile, or worse. Even small favors, protection, introductions, a seat at a feast, became the currency of survival. The world ran on debt, and kindness was the first entry in every account book. Fast forward to today, and you'll find that kindness with strings is everywhere. Maybe you've borrowed money from a friend, only to feel a chill in the air when you're slow to repay. Maybe a neighbor offers to help, but reminds you, again and again, of their sacrifice. Maybe your parents' generosity is wielded as leverage, invoked during every argument, an IOU that never really expires. The gift starts to feel less like grace and more like a hook, one that tugs at your sense of freedom, your choices, even your dignity. Social psychology has a name for this: the norm of reciprocity. It's one of the most powerful forces in human interaction. When someone does something for you, you feel compelled, sometimes even coerced, to give back. If you don't, guilt and anxiety gnaw at you. The ledger grows heavier. Salespeople know this, which is why they give free samples, offer unsolicited advice, or provide little gifts. Suddenly, you're buying something you didn't want, just to even the score. But the strings attached to kindness aren't always so obvious. Sometimes, they're hidden beneath layers of expectation and etiquette. Maybe you're invited to a wedding, and the cost of the gift spirals into anxiety. Maybe your boss offers you a favor, a day off, a plum assignment, only to call it in months later, expecting extra work or unspoken loyalty. Help becomes a hook, and the only way out is to pay, comply, or pull away entirely. In families, the web is even tighter. A parent's sacrifice is invoked as a claim on your life choices. After all I've done for you. A sibling's gift is a bargaining chip, used to win arguments or secure support. Even acts of love can become transactional, a running tally that shapes every interaction. The emotional toll is heavy. When kindness is currency, trust is eroded. Gratitude curdles into obligation. You may find yourself resenting the very people who helped you, longing to escape the debt but unsure how. Guilt, shame, and anxiety pile up, making it harder to ask for help or to offer it without calculation. But why does this happen? At its root, kindness with strings is about power, the power to influence, to control, to bind another person to you. In societies where survival depended on group loyalty, this power was necessary. But in the modern world, it can become toxic, a way to manipulate rather than support. Yet, the opposite extreme is no better. Pure, unconditional generosity is rare, and even those who claim to give without hope of return often expect something: respect, recognition, even just the warm glow of being seen as good. When this is not acknowledged, disappointment seeps in, and the strings begin to reappear. The challenge, then, is to see the ledger for what it is: a human invention, a tool for keeping communities together, but also a source of invisible chains. If you want to escape the trap of kindness with strings, you must first acknowledge it. Notice when help feels like a hook. Name the debt, negotiate its terms, or, when possible, let it go. The healthiest relationships are not those where kindness is absent, but those where kindness is freely given and freely received, where debts are acknowledged, but never weaponized, where generosity flows both ways, not as a transaction, but as a dance of mutual care and respect. So next time you find yourself on either end of the ledger, ask, am I giving with open hands or with hidden hooks? Am I receiving with gratitude or with growing anxiety? The answers may be uncomfortable, but they are the first step toward real freedom, the kind that honors both generosity and autonomy, both connection and independence. Because in the end, kindness is not a currency. Its true value is only revealed when the strings are finally cut. Cognitive load flooding. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to think straight when you're tired, overwhelmed, or bombarded with information? You sit through a marathon of lectures or religious readings, listen to rules repeated until your mind goes numb, or stay up all night chasing deadlines or rituals. At first, you try to pay attention, but after a while, something shifts. Your focus blurs, your curiosity fades, your ability to analyze or question quietly evaporates. This is not a failure of willpower or intelligence. It's cognitive load flooding, a powerful ancient technique for controlling the mind by drowning it in exhaustion and mental noise. Picture yourself at a late-night study session or at a weekend retreat where the agenda never ends. Maybe it's an all-hands meeting at work, a military induction, or the first days inside a closed community. You're ushered from activity to activity, lecture to lecture, reading to reading, ritual to ritual. The clock disappears. The outside world fades. You lose track of how long you've been sitting, standing, chanting, or listening. At first, you struggle to keep up, scribbling notes, asking questions, trying to stay sharp. But eventually the words wash over you, and you realize you're too tired to care. Science tells us your brain has limits. Limits on attention, limits on memory, limits on how many complex thoughts it can juggle at once. This is cognitive load, and it is not infinite. Sleep deprivation, information overload, and sensory bombardment all push you closer to that edge. The more mental energy you spend just trying to process what's coming in, the less you have left to reflect, question, or resist. Imagine your mind as a bucket. At first, you can carry the weight, even add a few stones of your own, doubts, analysis, challenges, but as the bucket fills, each new drop threatens to spill it over. When it's full, you can only hold on. The critical mind, the part that questions, doubts, and weighs alternatives, gets pushed aside by the urgent need to keep up. This is why, in cults and high-pressure groups, cognitive load flooding is a deliberate tactic. Recruits are kept up late, woken early, denied privacy or rest. Endless rituals, standing, kneeling, repeating phrases, replace normal routines. Long sermons, emotional confessions, complex readings, all designed to overload the brain's ability to process, let alone question. In this state, critical thinking isn't just difficult, it's neurologically impossible. Your brain switches from thoughtful reflection to pure survival mode. Just absorb, just comply, just get through it. It's not just about obedience. Over time, cognitive load flooding subtly rewires your sense of reality. You begin to accept ideas or narratives you'd normally question, simply because you lack the bandwidth to challenge them. Your memories blur. Was that yesterday or today? Was that story fact or fiction? Rituals blur into doctrine, doctrine into habit, until questioning feels as alien as flying. You're too tired to rebel, too overloaded to even want to. Compliance becomes a relief, a way to reduce the mental pressure, a shortcut to belonging and rest. You see this far beyond cults or extreme cases. In universities, new students endure sleepless weeks of orientation, endless readings, hazing rituals, and a constant barrage of new faces and rules. In corporate settings, trainees sit through hours of slides, buzzwords, and forced enthusiasm, barely keeping their eyes open by the end. Religious and political movements use marathon gatherings and emotional appeals, knowing that fatigue makes the heart and mind more suggestible. Even in families or friendships, drama and constant demands can exhaust your mental energy until you give in, just to keep the peace. Sleep deprivation is the sharpest tool. Studies show that just one night of poor sleep cuts your cognitive capacity by half. Decision-making falters, memory fragments, emotional regulation collapses. You can be led, cajoled, or manipulated while barely recognizing what's happening, because your brain is running on fumes. The mind wants rest, not revolution. The easiest way out is to stop questioning, just accept, just agree, just follow along. But it's not only about fatigue, it's about flooding. Information overload has the same numbing effect. Long lectures, complex jargon, dense readings, relentless rituals, each adds to the load, filling the brain with facts, doctrines, or procedures until there's no room left for independent thought. The more you try to keep up, the less you have left to ask why, or even, do I agree? Your mind, overwhelmed, seeks relief in the very thing it should resist: surrender. Cognitive load flooding isn't always malicious. Sometimes it's an accident of ambition. Schools that want to cover everything, workplaces desperate for buy-in, families striving for connection. But the effect is the same. When your mind is flooded, your soul goes quiet. You lose sight of your own voice in the clamor. You become easier to guide, easier to shape, easier to lead. The digital world amplifies this effect. Endless notifications, social media feeds, breaking news, and information on demand keep your cognitive load perpetually near the red line. You try to keep up, but the river never stops. After a while, you become numb, scrolling, liking, absorbing, but rarely thinking deeply or questioning what you see. Your mind is busy but unanchored, exhausted but unsatisfied. So, what's the way out? The first step is awareness. Notice when your brain feels full, when fatigue or information overload has dulled your curiosity. Pay attention to the moments when you find yourself agreeing just to end the conversation, or accepting ideas you'd normally challenge. These are signals, warnings that your critical mind is drowning. Step back, slow down, seek rest. Give yourself time to reflect, to wonder, to let your own thoughts catch up to the noise. If you lead others, be careful with their attention. Don't mistake silence for agreement or exhaustion for loyalty. Real learning and real connection happen in the space between tasks, in moments of quiet, in the slow work of questioning. If you find yourself in a group that never lets up, never allows doubt or rest, beware. Flooding is not a sign of strength. It's a way to keep you from remembering you are free. In the end, your mind is precious and its limits are real. You are not weak for needing sleep, silence, or space. You are human. The next time you feel yourself drowning in words, rituals, or rules, remember, exhaustion is not enlightenment, and compliance born of fatigue is not true belief. Step back, breathe, and reclaim your right to question, even when the world wants you too tired to try. Thought reform circles. Imagine sitting in a circle with others, ready to share your thoughts, your hopes, your doubts. The room feels safe at first, a space for honesty, for exchange, for connection. But as the conversation begins, you notice the boundaries, which ideas are greeted with nods and smiles, which are met with silence, which spark a faint flicker of tension in the air. Soon, the unwritten rules become clear. There are things you're allowed to say, and things you're not. Welcome to the world of thought reform circles, where discussion becomes a ritual of conformity, and every original idea is slowly, inexorably starved of oxygen. You might think you're free to speak, but your brain picks up the signals long before you realize it. When someone offers an approved opinion, the group leans in, rewarding with agreement, eye contact, even applause. When a riskier idea surfaces, the temperature drops. No one has to say a word. A sideways glance, an awkward silence, the subtle withdrawal of attention. All are enough to send the message, this is not the place for questioning. With each encounter, you learn to prune your own mind, to choose the path of least resistance, to echo what is safe. Psychologists call this normative conformity. Humans are social animals, finely tuned to the approval and disapproval of the group. The fear of exclusion runs deeper than almost any other, wired into the oldest parts of our brain. In the safety of numbers, the cost of speaking out can feel like a threat to survival itself. So, you adjust, word by word, thought by thought. Even the act of brainstorming becomes an exercise in self-editing. Better not say that, you think. They'll never understand. Little by little, your most original ideas, the doubts, the dreams, the challenges, are buried beneath a mask of agreement. History is filled with examples of thought reform circles in action. In totalitarian regimes, discussion groups were used to root out dissent and enforce orthodoxy. The room was the court, the group its jury. Those who voiced unacceptable ideas faced not just argument, but social death, mockery, isolation, shame. Even in more subtle forms, the same patterns emerge in classrooms, workplaces, religious communities, activist circles. The rules are rarely written, but everyone knows them. Echo the approved view, and you belong. Challenge it, and you are gently, or not so gently, pushed to the edges. You may believe this could never happen to you. But think back. Have you ever hesitated to share a doubt with friends, knowing it would kill the mood? Have you ever sat through a meeting where everyone seemed to agree, while, in silence, each person secretly disagreed? These are the microcosms of thought reform, where truth is sacrificed on the altar of group harmony, where originality withers from neglect. The process is subtle, almost invisible. At first you offer a small disagreement, maybe just a different angle. It lands with a thud. Someone changes the subject or makes a joke or gives you that look, the one that says, "We don't do that here." Shame pricks your skin. Next time, you keep your mouth shut. Over weeks, months, years, you watch as the same few opinions are echoed again and again, louder each time, until they become the only reality the group can remember. Dissent becomes unthinkable. Even those who secretly disagree begin to doubt themselves. If everyone else believes it, maybe I'm wrong. Self-censorship becomes a reflex. The circle tightens. This is not just social awkwardness, it's a system. In its most extreme form, it becomes a tool of power. Leaders encourage dialogue, but only within the safe boundaries of doctrine. Any original idea, no matter how gentle, how well-intentioned, is met with shame, silence, or scorn. You may not be shouted down, but you are erased, airbrushed out of the conversation by sheer neglect. Your contributions fade, and with them, your sense of self. Even outside formal groups, the dynamic persists. On social media, only certain opinions survive the rush of likes and retweets. Others are met with ridicule, dogpiled, or simply ignored until they vanish. In families, taboo topics are surrounded by unspoken boundaries. In professional life, the meeting after the meeting becomes the only place where real disagreement is allowed, but only in whispers, never in the open. Over time, the group doesn't just suppress original thought, it forgets that such thought ever existed. The boundaries of the circle become the boundaries of imagination itself. Young people enter, eager to impress and learn the rules by osmosis. Veterans may remember when things were different, but nostalgia gives way to resignation. A chilling sameness settles over the room, a quiet, persistent pressure that says, "This is how we do things here." But something essential is lost in this ritual. Creativity dies. Innovation dries up. Even friendship becomes brittle, dependent on constant performance, constant affirmation. The group may feel unified, but it is unified in fear. Fear of exile, fear of difference, fear of being alone with your own mind. And yet, the spark of originality never disappears completely. It lives on in late-night doubts, in scribbled notes never shared, in the restless longing for a place where truth is not just tolerated, but celebrated. Sometimes, one voice breaks the circle, speaking a dangerous thought, risking the chill, enduring the silence. Sometimes, that is enough to start a change, to remind others that conversation is not a ritual, but a living, breathing act of creation. If you find yourself in a thought reform circle, notice what is not being said. Notice the opinions that disappear in the pauses, the laughter that is just a little too forced, the way your own mind shrinks to fit the space allowed. Ask yourself, what would I say if I was not afraid? What might we create if all voices were heard? The answers may be risky. They may cost you comfort or approval, but they may also be the only path back to a world where discussion is real, where ideas are born in sunlight, not in shadow. Thought reform circles are everywhere, shaping not just what you say, but what you dare to think. But every circle can be broken. All it takes is the courage to speak an original idea, to welcome the silence that follows, and to remember that real conversation is not an echo. It's the wild, unruly birth of something new. Induced existential crisis. It begins with a crack, a sudden, sharp fracture in the way you see the world. It might happen in a classroom, a therapy session, a sermon, or an initiation. At first, you are asked innocent questions. What if everything you've been told is wrong? What if nothing is real except what we show you? Sometimes it starts with praise, with promises of truth, wisdom, purpose. But soon it turns. The ground beneath you shifts. You are left reeling, unmoored. Everything that felt certain, your memories, your values, your sense of self, is drawn into question and then torn apart. This is not an accident. It's not the result of life's ordinary confusion or the natural crises that everyone faces. This is a deliberate act. They want you to doubt. They want your certainty to collapse. It is the induced existential crisis, the intentional engineering of inner chaos so profound that you will grasp at anything, anyone, to make the pain stop. At first, you may resist. You defend your beliefs, your habits, your history. But they are relentless. They use logic, emotion, sometimes even love as weapons. They point out every contradiction in your upbringing, every hypocrisy in society, every mistake you've ever made. They attack your faith, your politics, your family, your memories, your very identity. At some point, the strain becomes too much. The doubt seeps in. You start to wonder, what if they're right? What if I am lost? What if the world is meaningless, cruel, and empty? Except here, with them, the emotional storm that follows is not mild. It's terror, loneliness, and humiliation rolled into one. You feel as if you're falling forever, with no hope of landing. The world blurs. Everything that once gave you comfort now feels hollow. Even your inner voice turns against you. You're a fool, you've been lied to, you have no idea who you are. This is the moment they are waiting for. You are raw, defenseless, desperate for something, anything that feels solid. Now, and only now, do they offer the antidote. Their teachings, their rules, their leader's voice, their sacred text. We have the truth you never knew you needed. We alone can save you from the chaos. They extend a hand, not to help you up, but to draw you in. The price of certainty is surrender. If you want relief from the storm, you must accept their system, their worldview, their version of reality. No questions, no doubts. All you have to do is let them rebuild you from the ground up. This process has been used for centuries by cults, high-control groups, and authoritarian systems of every kind. It goes by many names: thought reform, ego stripping, deconstruction. In cults, it's called breaking down. In totalitarian regimes, it's re-education. In some therapy cults, it's framed as healing your inner child or finding your authentic self. The method is the same: destroy, then replace. It can happen fast, or it can be drawn out over months or years. Sometimes, it starts with love bombing, overwhelming affection, acceptance, and attention. You feel special, seen, chosen. Then comes the turn. Isolation from outsiders, endless critique of your old self, a steady drip of contradictions meant to destabilize you. They may push you into confession, demanding that you reveal secrets, fears, private doubts. Every vulnerability becomes ammunition. The old you is steadily dismantled. You may lose your friends, your sense of humor, your opinions. Even your sense of time and memory may distort. The new world you are offered is rigid, simple, absolute. Everything outside is dangerous, wrong, or deluded. Only inside, only close to the leader or the group, is there any safety or meaning. What you don't realize is that the very chaos they claim to rescue you from was manufactured by their own design. The psychological cost is immense. Survivors of induced existential crises often struggle for years with anxiety, depression, and self-doubt. The lines between truth and lie, memory and suggestion, freedom and obedience blur until you can barely remember what you once believed. You may find yourself defending the very people who broke you, grateful for the certainty they now offer. But the cracks remain. Sometimes, late at night, a voice in your mind wonders if the price of relief was too high. If you are lucky, that doubt grows. You start to notice the cycle, how every question is deflected, how dissent is punished, how the truth never changes, no matter how much evidence appears. You may meet others who escaped, or you catch a glimpse of life outside the walls. The existential crisis returns, but this time, it is not manufactured. It is your soul searching for itself again. Escaping the aftermath is hard. You must rebuild your worldview from pieces, learning to trust your mind, your feelings, your memories. The world will feel dangerous at first, chaotic, Unpredictable, sometimes cruel, but for the first time, the questions are yours. The meaning you create is real, not handed down. The struggle for authenticity is terrifying, but it is the only way to recover your freedom. Induced existential crisis is one of the cruelest tools of manipulation ever devised. It is an assault not just on your mind, but on your very spirit, shattering certainty, then offering only captivity as relief. If you see it happening, if you feel your doubts being weaponized, your confusion being used to sell you answers, pause. Remember, chaos is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that your mind is alive. Anyone who shatters your world just to rebuild it in their image is not a savior, but a thief of souls. True meaning cannot be given. It must be discovered. Real teaching leaves you freer, not more afraid. The antidote to chaos is not blind obedience, but the courage to face uncertainty and build something honest on your own terms. The path out of an induced crisis is long, but on the other side is a self that is truly yours. Fractured maybe, but finally beautifully free. Us versus them trap. You want to believe you think for yourself, that your loyalty is earned, that your values are your own. But there's a force older than reason, deeper than logic, that shapes how you see the world and everyone in it. The urge to divide life into us and them. It starts as a subtle instinct, a whisper that your group is special, chosen, misunderstood, or persecuted. Soon it grows louder until the world outside feels dark, menacing, and dangerous, and the people inside feel righteous, pure, safe. You become tangled in the US versus them trap, where every difference is a threat, every question a challenge, every disagreement a form of betrayal. Cults are built on this trap. So are extreme political movements, closed religious sects, and even some families or friend groups. The world is cast as evil, corrupt, lost. Only the group knows the truth. Only the group can save you. Anyone who doubts, who pushes back, who even asks the wrong question, isn't just misguided, they are betraying the cause, endangering everyone's salvation, inviting the enemy in. Disagreement becomes more than a risk. It becomes a sin. It's a psychological sleight of hand, but it works because it taps into some of the oldest survival wiring in the brain. Belonging isn't just a comfort, it's a necessity. In the ancient world, being cast out meant death. So, your brain is exquisitely tuned to the threat of exclusion. If the price of safety is conformity, most people will pay it, often without even realizing they're doing it. The trap begins with subtle language. They don't understand us. We're the only ones who care about the truth. Everyone else is lost, evil, or blind. Leaders repeat these mantras until they become background music, the rhythm of daily life. You start to see signs everywhere, evidence that outsiders are out to get you, that the world is hostile, that your doubts are proof of weakness. Any critical thought becomes a private shame, a risk you learn to silence. Disagreement becomes dangerous not because of the logic of the argument, but because it threatens your standing in the group. If you question the leader, challenge a core belief, or point out contradictions, you feel the temperature in the room change. Eyes avert. People go silent. Maybe you're called in for a private talk, reminded of the group's sacrifices, warned about the dangers of outside influence. The message is clear. Dissent is betrayal, and betrayal is sin. This isn't just social pressure. It's a reprogramming of your emotional landscape. The group's approval feels like oxygen, and its disapproval feels like suffocation. Over time, your mind learns to shut down anything that risks exile. You self-censor, rehearse the party line, scan your own thoughts for traces of heresy. The US versus them narrative becomes a filter. What doesn't fit is pushed away or explained away, no matter how glaring the contradiction. This binary thinking is intoxicating. It makes life simple. Every question has an answer, every problem a culprit, every fear a scapegoat. You feel certain, righteous, protected. But the price is heavy. You lose the ability to see nuance, to learn from difference, to change and grow. The world outside shrinks into a cartoonish enemy, and the world inside becomes a prison disguised as paradise. Cults perfect this technique, but the trap exists everywhere. Politicians whip up crowds with talk of enemies and traitors. Religions warn of outsiders and apostates. Even families can fall into this pattern. Nobody else can be trusted. You only have us. The more threatened the group feels, the tighter the walls become. Love becomes conditional. Loyalty is constantly tested, and individuality is quietly erased. Escaping the US versus them trap isn't easy. The fear of exile is powerful, and the lure of certainty is addictive. The first step is noticing the script. Listen for language that divides, that demonizes, that insists on total loyalty. Notice when disagreement is punished not with reason, but with shame or threats. Ask yourself, does questioning make me a traitor? Does leaving make me evil? Or am I being asked to trade my freedom for the illusion of safety? True belonging isn't built on fear or sameness. It's built on honesty, on the courage to disagree, on the trust that difference doesn't mean danger. When a group tells you that everyone else is evil, ask what they are afraid of. When doubt feels like sin, remember that questions are the roots of growth. The world is complicated, messy, and full of shades. The US versus them trap promises security, but it only delivers division and silence. In the end, you have to choose. The comfort of belonging bought by obedience, or the loneliness and freedom of thinking for yourself. The world outside may be imperfect, but so is every group, every leader, every cause. The real betrayal is giving up your right to see, to ask, to decide for yourself what is true. When you step beyond the trap, you find not enemies, but other travelers, each with their own fears and hopes, just like you. And maybe, for the first time, you remember that real righteousness isn't about dividing the world, but daring to belong to yourself. False liberation myth. There's a strange comfort in being told you're free. It's a promise that echoes through revolutions, through manifestos, through marketing campaigns and political speeches. You are liberated now. You can speak, choose, be who you want. But beneath the triumphant slogans and raised flags, a subtle game is played. You're free, but only within lines drawn by someone else. You're invited to speak, but only in a language they approve. You're told to think for yourself, but only within the frame they've designed for you. This is the false liberation myth, the story that promises freedom but delivers a carefully curated cage. Throughout history, societies have been remade in the name of liberation. New governments overthrow the old, empires are toppled, chains are broken. The rhetoric is always the same. Now you are free. But listen closely, and you'll hear the echo of new rules, new boundaries, new authorities ready to define what liberation really means. In the aftermath of revolution, the first task is to erase the past. Books are banned, statues fall, songs change, symbols of the old order are smashed, not just to remove their power, but to rewrite the script of what freedom looks like. The victors say, now you are liberated. But here's what that means. Dress this way. Speak this way. Believe these things. Dissent is not just discouraged, it is labeled as a threat to the new freedom. Yesterday's rebels become today's police. The cage has new paint, but the bars remain. Psychologists call this prescribed autonomy. You are told to be yourself, but only in ways that don't disturb the order. The appearance of choice is manufactured. You can pick between two pre-approved options. Voice opinions within a narrow band, perform self-expression that always bends back to the party line. This trick is most obvious in authoritarian states, but it exists everywhere, in schools, corporations, families, and even within subcultures that claim to be alternative or free. Consider the story of a young woman raised in a strict community. One day, she's told the old rules are gone, that she is free to follow her dreams, but every dream she names is questioned. Are you sure that's really you? Are you sure you're not just being selfish? Wouldn't you rather follow the path we've paved? Eventually, she learns that the boundaries of her new freedom are just as fixed as the old chains. Only now, to question them is to be accused of ingratitude, of betraying the very freedom she was promised. Or think of the workplace that celebrates authenticity and innovation, until your authenticity challenges the brand, or your innovation disrupts the chain of command. Suddenly you're reminded, gently at first, then firmly, that real freedom is knowing how to stay in line, how to color inside the lines of corporate culture. This is the paradox of the false liberation myth. You are allowed to choose, as long as your choices don't threaten the system. You can speak, as long as your words don't question the rules. You can be yourself, as long as that self is compatible with the collective story. In politics, the myth is weaponized. Citizens are told their chains are broken, but new laws monitor their speech. New platforms surveil their opinions, New forms of propaganda define what liberation should feel like. You are free to vote, free to assemble, free to believe. But those who use their freedom to dissent are ostracized, punished, or silenced. The cost of questioning is framed as a threat to the group, a disruption of unity, a regression to chaos. Social media, too, amplifies the myth. Platforms promise a space for self-expression, for free thought, for community. But behind the scenes, algorithms favor conformity. Trending topics reward groupthink, and dissenting voices are filtered or shadow banned. The liberated user discovers that their speech is only free as long as it doesn't disturb the algorithm's invisible boundaries. The emotional toll is subtle but corrosive. At first, you may feel exhilarated. So many choices, so much space to move, so many ways to be seen. But slowly you sense the presence of new walls, the pressure to fit the right kind of liberated self. Anxiety rises when you stray too far from the script. Shame follows when your truth is met with cold silence or sudden backlash. You learn to police yourself, to anticipate what is welcome and what will be punished. The cage becomes internalized. You become your own warden. But there is a deeper cost, the erosion of true autonomy. Real freedom means not just the absence of chains, but the presence of self-determination, the right to question, to experiment, to risk, to fail. The false liberation myth steals that. It gives you the keys to a room and tells you it's the world. It asks you to cheer your release, while keeping the windows locked and the exits hidden. History warns us. Every liberation risks being followed by a new regime, a new orthodoxy, a new dogma disguised as progress. The work of freedom is never finished. It must be renewed, challenged, and defended again and again. Real liberation is messy, uncomfortable, sometimes lonely. It requires the courage to ask, whose freedom is this? Who decides what it means to be free? What am I still not allowed to question? If you feel the unease of the false liberation myth, if you sense that your choices are curated, your speech policed, your dreams pre-approved, don't numb it away. Sit with it. Ask what true freedom would require of you. Seek out dissenting voices, forbidden questions, unapproved paths. Test the boundaries, and when you find them, name them out loud. Because in the end, real liberation is not a gift bestowed from above. It is a practice, a struggle, a stubborn insistence on thinking, loving, and living in ways that may never fit the script. Only then can you say you are truly free. Scarcity of exit paths. What does it really mean to feel trapped? Not just uncomfortable, not merely unwelcome, but so tightly boxed in that the idea of leaving feels less like freedom and more like obliteration. In the harshest environments, cults, coercive relationships, abusive workplaces, and manipulative social circles, this isn't an accident. It's a strategy. It's called scarcity of exit paths, and it works by slowly, systematically dismantling every road out until escape itself feels like a kind of death. At first, the group, the leader, or even the system welcomes you. You're celebrated for joining, praised for your potential, wrapped in the warm certainty of a cause, a family, or a dream job that promises to fill every emptiness. There are rules, but they're easy at first. There's loyalty, but it feels mutual. And somewhere inside, maybe you tell yourself you could always walk away if things change. Nobody owns you. There are exits everywhere, or so you think. But over time, the walls begin to close in. The rules multiply. The subtle warnings start. Out there, no one understands you. If you leave, you'll lose everything you've built. People on the outside are dangerous, jealous, hostile. Maybe you notice that friends or coworkers who left are never mentioned or are spoken of with pity or scorn. Maybe you're quietly asked to cut off ties with negative influences, old friends, critical family, former mentors. Every exit is painted with shadows. Little by little, the world beyond becomes smaller, colder, more dangerous in your mind. The leader's approval or the group's acceptance starts to feel like oxygen. You depend on it not just for praise, but for your sense of safety, even your sense of self. Job opportunities fade away. You've been too busy, too isolated, your reputation now inextricably tied to the group. Family relationships weaken, strained by secrets or outright conflict engineered by the system. Sometimes your finances are entangled. Your paycheck goes through the group, your home is owned by the company, Your skills are only marketable inside this particular world. The longer you stay, the fewer bridges remain. Psychologists call this a closing of exit paths, a process as old as power itself. History is full of groups who isolated members to maintain control. Communes in the wilderness, monasteries with strict silence, cults that cut off all outside contact. But the same mechanism operates in modern lives, in jobs that demand all-in commitment, in relationships that make you give up hobbies, friends, even parts of your identity, just to keep the peace. The tactics can be obvious: locked doors, confiscated phones, threats. But often they are invisible, a slow eroding of options, until your world shrinks to a single path, paved by someone else. This scarcity becomes existential. You start to weigh the cost of leaving, and it feels unbearable. Where would you go? Who would take you in? How would you survive, cut off from the only home or livelihood you've known? The leader whispers, or the group insists, if you leave, you'll be alone. No one will understand. You'll regret it. And you begin to believe it, not just as a fear, but as a fact of life. You rehearse the idea of escape, only to hit a wall of dread, as if exile from the group is the same as exile from the world itself. For some, the fear is physical. Threats of violence, stories of what happened to those who ran. For others, it's emotional, the terror of rejection, the grief of losing belonging, the shame of failure. Some groups engineer financial ruin for those who leave: debts, blacklists, ruined reputations. Others use secrets or blackmail, turning trust into a trap. But most effective is the psychological manipulation that convinces you there is nothing for you out there. Over time, the mind itself becomes the cage. Even when doors are open, you no longer see them as real exits. It's a strategy that can destroy not just agency, but hope. You stop daydreaming about alternatives. The road out fades from your imagination. You become an expert at rationalizing why you stay. It's not that bad. I've invested too much. Maybe it'll get better. Everywhere is hard. But the truth is harder still. You stay because the alternative feels like death. Sometimes, you even help reinforce the scarcity for others, warning newcomers about the dangers of leaving, policing doubts, keeping the group's mythology alive. It's a strange, bitter comfort. Better to be safe together, even if it means never leaving. The longer you stay, the deeper the roots, the fewer the exits. But then, every so often, someone does leave. Maybe it's an act of desperation, a secret plan, or a sudden terrifying leap. They vanish, sometimes into silence, sometimes into a world that, for all its unknowns, is freer than the cage they left behind. For those still inside, the departure is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It sparks questions, shakes the illusion, maybe even begins to crack the walls. If you've ever been trapped in a place with no exit, you know the pain is not just in the restriction, but in the way your own mind becomes your warden. You lose not just freedom, but the ability to imagine freedom. The world outside grows monstrous or impossible. The choice to stay becomes not a choice at all, but a grim inheritance. And yet, escape is possible, even when it seems unthinkable. History is full of stories of those who rebuilt their lives from nothing, who found new families, new communities, new purpose beyond the walls that once defined them. It begins with the smallest act of defiance, the recognition that the scarcity is manufactured, that the exits may be hard, but they exist. It grows with the courage to reach out, to risk exile for the chance at real freedom, to trust that the world outside is bigger than the stories you were told. If you are listening and you feel trapped, remember, the feeling that escape is death is the final illusion of control. The world will be hard, yes. You may lose what feels like everything, but beyond the fear, there is a life that is yours. Exits exist, even if you have to build them yourself, stone by stone, word by word, step by trembling step. The first move is the hardest, but it is not the end. It is the beginning of your own story, written in your own voice, beyond the walls that once felt like the whole world. Controlled spiritual highs. You step into a grand hall, a temple, a gathering at the edge of night. The air vibrates with anticipation. There's music, deep, rhythmic, rising and falling like a tide that knows your name. Voices swell in harmony, bodies sway, hands lift, and you feel your skin prickle as if the whole room is breathing in time. The leader takes the stage. The lights dim, the pulse of drums grows louder. Words are spoken, slow, poetic, filled with promises and invocations. You feel yourself lifted, almost weightless, as emotion crashes over you. Awe, unity, ecstasy, surrender. In that moment, you're sure you've touched the divine. This is what you've been told to wait for. Proof, revelation, holy confirmation. But underneath the poetry and power, something else is at work. A perfectly calibrated sequence of rituals, rhythms, and suggestion. You are not just feeling God, you are riding a biochemical surge, an engineered spiritual high. Every culture, every faith, every movement on earth knows the recipe. There are songs that are more than melodies. They are triggers, drums that mimic the beating of your own heart, chants that build, syllable by syllable, until your mind loses its edges. Incense, lights, collective motion. Each ingredient slips beneath your conscious mind, opening the gates of emotion. You enter a trance, a state where normal skepticism and critical thought dissolve, replaced by a sense of oneness, a tidal wave of belonging. In this state, the words of a leader can feel like prophecy, a stranger's touch can feel like kinship, and the smallest coincidence can feel like fate. Science is caught up with the mystery. When people sing together, their brains release oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Rhythmic movement and breath synchronize not just heartbeats, but the neural circuits that govern empathy and euphoria. Music triggers dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and anticipation. Hypnotic speeches, repeated slogans, and theatrical pauses lull the critical mind, opening the door to suggestion. Endorphins surge, and you are swept away, high on chemistry, convinced of revelation. None of this is accidental. Skilled leaders, ancient and modern, know how to conduct the orchestra of emotion. Religious revivals, political rallies, self-help seminars, they follow the same blueprint. Call and response, crescendos, collective chanting, waves of music that rise and fall in perfect time with your breath. Even the building, the stained glass, the incense, the hush before the sermon, is designed to overwhelm your senses, to prime you for awe, to make you hungry for the next peak. When the ritual is at its height, you lose track of yourself. You cry, laugh, tremble, fall to your knees. It feels spontaneous, but it is anything but. The leaders tell you this is the spirit, the truth, the proof you've been seeking. In your longing for meaning, for connection, you accept the explanation. The boundary between divine encounter and orchestrated high blurs. You are left changed, but not always in the way you imagine. People leave these gatherings with tears in their eyes, swearing they have witnessed miracles. They feel lighter, unburdened, certain of purpose. Some are healed. Some are moved to acts of courage, or charity, or devotion. But for many, the afterglow fades. Doubt returns. The world feels flat, ordinary again. And so, they seek the next event, the next ritual, the next fix. The cycle repeats. You become a pilgrim, not for wisdom or transformation, but for the next rush of certainty. There is nothing inherently evil in collective ecstasy, in music, in ritual. These are ancient tools for building community, for softening hearts, for forging bonds deeper than reason. But the danger comes when you are told that the feeling itself is proof, that your euphoria is the voice of the divine, the seal of approval, the answer to every doubt. In those moments, your morality, your beliefs, your sense of reality are vulnerable. You may be led to surrender more than just your skepticism. You may be led to give away your agency, your money, your body, your will. History is full of cautionary tales. Cults and movements, both spiritual and secular, have used the ritual of the controlled high to draw people in, to keep them loyal, to silence dissent. Charismatic leaders perform miracles on stage, only to be revealed as magicians behind the curtain. Political demagogues stir crowds into frenzy, then point to the emotion as evidence that their truth is absolute. Even in more benign settings, self-help gurus and motivational speakers build entire empires on the promise of a transformative high, leaving their followers addicted to the next seminar, the next breakthrough, the next brief moment when everything seems to make sense. If you've ever felt empty after a spiritual mountaintop, if you've ever doubted the source of your certainty, know that you are not weak. You are human. Your brain is wired to seek these highs, to long for belonging, to crave the meaning that comes with awe. but you can learn to recognize the machinery behind the miracle. You can honor the beauty of ritual and music while refusing to surrender your critical mind. You can ask, what happens when the music fades? What remains when the speech ends? Does my conviction endure, or do I need another fix? Controlled spiritual highs are not always traps, but they are always powerful. They can lift you up, unite you, change you. But the true measure of your journey is not in the peaks of ecstasy, but in the quiet valleys. When you listen for the voice of the divine in silence, when you find meaning in ordinary days, when you discover your own wisdom beneath the roar of the crowd. Do not fear your longing for transcendence, but never let anyone tell you that a feeling, however overwhelming, is proof that you must surrender your mind. The divine, if it exists, does not need stage lights, scripted speeches, or thundering drums to speak. The most honest truths survive the silence, endure the doubts, and remain when the music finally ends. Sacrifice equals worth. Imagine being measured not by who you are, but by what you're willing to lose. In this world, your value is tallied in coins, hours, broken dreams. Every peace you surrender, every comfort you deny yourself, every hope you sacrifice for a cause that demands everything and leaves nothing for you. The doctrine is never written in plain language, but it shapes your life as surely as gravity. The more you give up, the more worthy you become. And if you have nothing left to give, no more money, time, love, or even self, you're told you finally reached a higher plane. It starts small, a request for a little more time, a little more help, a little more faith. You don't notice the line moving at first. Maybe you donate to a good cause or volunteer extra hours. Maybe you skip a meal, give up a favorite hobby for the sake of spiritual growth. At every turn, you're praised for your sacrifice, applauded for going without, for giving what others held back, for putting the mission or the group or the leader above your own needs. The applause is addictive, a warm light in a cold world. You start to wonder what else you might give, what other comfort you might surrender, to feel that worthiness again. Over time, sacrifice becomes the only currency that matters. Ordinary joys, rest, leisure, pleasure, self-expression are recast as selfishness, distractions, temptations to overcome. You're taught that pain is purification, that struggle is a mark of devotion, that those who suffer the most are the closest to the truth. Stories of saints and martyrs, of great founders and tireless leaders are told again and again. Each tale is a lesson. They gave up everything, and so should you. Slowly the calculus shifts. Kindness isn't enough unless it hurts. Service doesn't count unless it costs. You learn to measure your days in what you have lost, not what you have gained. When you're asked for money you don't have, you dig deeper, borrowing or going without necessities. When your time is stretched thin, you're told that true faith means making more room. Sleep less, work harder, neglect your own needs so you can serve. And when even your personality or your boundaries are seen as obstacles, you try to shed those too, molding yourself into whatever shape is praised that week. The people around you reinforce the lesson. Leaders and peers hold up those who sacrifice most as models to imitate. Anyone who hesitates is questioned. Don't you care enough? Aren't you grateful? The message is clear. To hold anything back is to admit you are unworthy. To say no is to say you do not belong. Over time, you internalize the equation. You begin to fear comfort, to distrust ease, to suspect your own desires. Guilt seeps in if you ever choose yourself. If you ever enjoy a moment for its own sake, you start to feel worthless if you cannot give more. If your wallet is empty, if your energy is gone, if your spirit is just too tired. Instead of care or concern, you meet disappointment. Why aren't you giving more? Don't you want to grow? You try harder, give more, and lose yourself piece by piece. The danger of sacrifice equals worth is that it never ends. There is always more you can give, more you can surrender, more of yourself you can erase. If you give your savings, you're praised for your faith. If you give your home, your career, your relationships, you're told you're approaching enlightenment. But when you have nothing left, when you are drained of joy and hope, you are not rescued. You are told this is the final test. And if you fail to give more, the verdict is silent but merciless. You are not worthy. Many cults and high-control groups use this dynamic with chilling precision. They push until you break and then hold you up as an example, either of ultimate devotion or of what happens to those who can't keep up. Sometimes the demands are overt: tithes, offerings, public confessions. Other times they are subtle: peer pressure, shaming, endless expectations. The goal is always the same: make sacrifice the price of belonging. But it is not just in cults. This logic haunts families, workplaces, even whole societies. How often are you told to put others first, to man up, to be strong, to ignore your needs for the greater good? The belief is so ingrained that you may not even recognize it as harmful. You feel guilty for resting, for saying no, for choosing joy over duty. You are taught to see yourself as a resource, not a person. When you finally reach your limit, you are told it's not enough. Yet the truth, as hard as it is to accept, is that worth does not come from suffering. Sacrifice is not a measure of your soul. You do not become more valuable by losing yourself for someone else's cause. Love, belonging, meaning, these are gifts, not rewards for pain endured. The endless demand for sacrifice only serves those who want to keep you small, obedient, and afraid to claim your own life. Breaking free is hard. You will feel the ghost of guilt at first, the urge to prove yourself through loss. You may find it difficult to trust comfort, to honor your desires, to say, "I am enough as I am." The world may tell you otherwise, but the real measure of worth is not what you can give up, but what you can build, share, and enjoy while you're alive. You are worthy, not because of what you lose, but because of who you are and what you bring into the world by simply being yourself. Sacrifice has its place, but it is not the path to worthiness. The more you give up for someone who only demands more, the further you get from your own truth. If you want to know your value, look not at your scars, but at your wholeness, at the life you claim, the love you receive, the joy you allow yourself. The world needs your gifts, not your ashes, and you are worthy, whether you give everything or nothing at all. False memory, engineering, you trust your memories. You build your identity from them, anchor your sense of self in the stories you believe are yours. But memory is not a recording. It's a living script, always vulnerable to editing, suggestion, and the quiet influence of those who claim to know you better than you know yourself. What happens when a leader, a therapist, a lover, or a group begins to reinterpret your past, nudging you to doubt your own experience until you start to believe you were always broken, and only they saw the truth in you? False memory engineering begins gently, almost invisibly. Someone you admire or depend on asks you to look deeper, to question your recollection. They urge you to remember what you missed, to reconsider moments you once saw as normal. "Are you sure that's how it happened?" they ask, voice calm, eyes sympathetic. Sometimes our minds protect us from the truth. The seed of doubt is planted. You replay your memories, searching for hidden wounds, secret flaws, subtle signs of brokenness you had never noticed before. Soon the questions become assertions. The leader remembers for you. They offer new interpretations. That time you felt left out, that was neglect. When you argued with your parents, it was actually abuse. Your sadness as a child was a symptom, proof you were already damaged. They say it with confidence, with love, with just enough authority to make you feel safe and unsafe at once. You want to trust yourself, but the voice of certainty, the voice that offers answers, is so seductive, especially if you are already lonely, already doubting, already desperate to belong. Gradually, you start to retell your own story in their words. The past you once saw as complicated or even happy becomes recast as a long, slow trauma, one that only the group or the leader or the therapist could ever recognize or heal. You remember things you never felt. You reinterpret neutral moments as evidence of harm. You assign motives to people who can no longer defend themselves. This is not a conscious lie. It's the machinery of memory at work. Memory, as neuroscientists know, is fragile, suggestible, and easily overwritten each time it is recalled. You don't notice how your language changes. You use their words, their diagnoses, their worldview. I guess I always felt lost. Maybe I never really belonged. No one else ever understood me. The more you repeat it, the more real it feels. You begin to question anyone who remembers things differently. Siblings, friends, your own parents. If they push back, you feel anger, shame, even terror. If your new reality is threatened, the group rallies around you, reinforcing the narrative. They just don't want you to heal. Only we know the real story. This is the power of emotional engineering, the creation of a new, broken self. A self whose only hope is the wisdom and guidance of those who rewrote the story. Your previous happiness is dismissed as denial. Your moments of resilience are recast as masks. Your old confidence is relabeled as arrogance or blindness. The group tells you that you were always wounded, and that only their love or their insight finally rescued you from a lifetime of invisible suffering. You cling to this narrative because it gives pain meaning, gives chaos order, gives your new community or leader a godlike role in your life. You find yourself grateful for being seen, for having your suffering named. Sometimes it feels like liberation. Finally, someone understands you. But underneath, there's a growing sense of dependence, even fear. If you ever question the narrative, if you remember a happier childhood or challenge the group's interpretation, you're told you're regressing, backsliding, sabotaging your own healing. You learn to doubt your own mind. You learn to fear your own truth. This manipulation is not limited to cults or fringe therapists. It happens in controlling relationships, in families obsessed with pathology, even in politics and media. Anyone who convinces you that your past is nothing but pain, that your story is only valid through their filter, is engineering your sense of self for their benefit. The more you believe you were always broken, the more grateful, loyal, and obedient you become. False memory engineering is a theft of your history. It robs you not only of your autonomy, but of your complexity, the right to have been happy, to have survived, to have seen your life in your own light. It chains you to a story of perpetual victimhood, with the leader or group as your only savior. It can take years, even a lifetime, to recover what was lost. The ability to remember on your own terms, to hold joy and pain together, to trust your own account of your life. But the first step out is noticing the narrative, asking, who benefits if I see myself as always broken? Whose words am I using to tell my story? What memories have I stopped trusting, and why? True healing does not erase the past or replace it with a single story. It accepts the mess, the contradictions, the shifting colors of memory, and allows you to hold your history with curiosity, not fear. You are more than what someone else says you are. Your past is not a weapon to be used against you, nor is your pain proof that you were destined to be lost. There will always be those who seek to rewrite your memories to keep you close, to make you need them. But your truth, complex, imperfect, and uniquely yours, remains. It waits beneath the surface, ready to be reclaimed the moment you trust your own voice again. Martyrdom reinforcement cycle. Somewhere, in a small room or a crowded hall, a person sits alone with their pain, exhausted, overlooked, sometimes abused, always enduring. Yet around them, the group whispers that this pain is not just a burden but a badge, a sign of loyalty, a mark of the highest character. You are told to suffer is to belong, to sacrifice is to become important, to give everything, to lose sleep, to endure humiliation, to suppress your own needs. This is not just expected, it is celebrated. This is the beginning of the martyrdom reinforcement cycle. It starts with a simple story. Suffering is noble. The narrative appears everywhere, in families, religions, cultures, even companies. The person who sacrifices most is praised most. The one who endures quietly is admired for their strength. Pain is no longer a warning or a signal to change. Instead, it is reframed as virtue. Every sleepless night, every dropped meal, every silent tear becomes evidence of your goodness. The more you suffer for the group, the more meaning your pain seems to carry, and the harder it becomes to imagine a life without it. Psychologists call this effort justification. When we work hard, endure hardship, or pay a heavy price for something, we convince ourselves it must be valuable. Otherwise, the pain was for nothing. Social groups, knowingly or not, amplify this effect. They reward sacrifice with attention, praise, or the promise of belonging. In cults and high-control groups, the dynamic is crystal clear. New members are put through punishing rituals, endless tasks, even public shaming. But those who survive are embraced, given special status, told they are chosen. The group's message is simple. The more you suffer for us, the more you matter. This cycle can be found in the fabric of history. In ancient Sparta, children were taught to endure brutal conditions, hunger, pain, even state-sanctioned beatings without complaint. Endurance was proof of virtue, and leaving the group or refusing to suffer was shameful. In medieval Christianity, saints and martyrs were glorified for their agony. Flagellants and ascetics became legends, their suffering a spectacle that inspired the masses. In 20th century political movements, party loyalists endured prison, exile, even torture, telling themselves and the world that their pain was proof of the righteousness of the cause. It's not just the past. In modern workplaces, the hero is often the person who works overtime, skips vacations, answers emails at midnight, sacrifices their health for the team. Look at how much she gives for the company, colleagues say, ignoring that the company gives little in return. In families, the silent parent who never rests, never complains, becomes a role model, while their exhaustion and quiet desperation are overlooked. The reinforcement cycle works like this. The group sees your pain, validates it, and in turn, you double down, pushing yourself harder, enduring more, sacrificing again and again. To quit, to set boundaries, to leave, becomes unthinkable. If suffering is virtue, then walking away is betrayal. The group, intentionally or not, binds you with the very chains you helped forge. Eventually, your identity merges with your role as the martyr. If you stop suffering, who are you? Neuroscience shows that social validation activates reward centers in the brain. When your sacrifice is praised, when your pain is noticed, you feel a powerful rush of meaning and connection. This makes the martyrdom cycle sticky, even as you burn out, even as your body screams for rest or your spirit withers from neglect. The promise of belonging and admiration keeps you chained. But there's a dark underside. The cycle demands ever greater sacrifices. Yesterday's heroics become today's baseline. The group raises the bar. More hours, more silence, more proof that you care enough to hurt. Dissenters, those who refuse to suffer or ask for fairness, are shamed, ostracized, or blamed for the group's failures. Compassion for the self becomes selfishness. Rest becomes weakness. Joy outside the group becomes treason. For some, the moment of awakening comes with a crash. Illness, breakdown, betrayal. You realize that the group's praise was conditional, that the love was transactional, that your suffering did not protect you from being cast out. The cycle ends not with a triumph, but with exhaustion and grief for the years lost to a story that was never truly yours. Escaping the martyrdom reinforcement cycle takes courage and, above all, clarity. It requires seeing pain for what it is, a signal, not a sacrament. It means questioning the stories you've been told, about virtue, about duty, about the price of love and loyalty. It means asking, who benefits from my suffering? Why must pain be the proof of my worth? Healthy groups, families, workplaces, communities honor effort, but do not demand suffering as proof of devotion. They celebrate rest, set boundaries, and support each other through struggle rather than rewarding self-sacrifice alone. They know that true loyalty comes from joy, meaning, and mutual respect, not from exhaustion and quiet despair. If you find yourself trapped in the martyrdom reinforcement cycle, if pain has become your badge, your passport, your only path to belonging, pause and ask, what would change if I laid my burden down? Who would I be if I sought joy, not suffering? The answers may unsettle you. The group may resist. But the possibility of freedom and genuine connection is worth the risk. You are not just the sum of your suffering. You are worthy even when you rest, even when you refuse to bleed for others, even when you choose to walk away from cycles that reward your pain more than your joy. In the end, the most radical act may not be to endure, but to step out of the cycle, to refuse to let your pain be the only thing that gives you meaning, and to discover who you are when you finally set it down. Symbolic language control. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that the words you've always trusted, words like freedom, love, truth, no longer mean what you thought they did. They look the same on the page, sound the same on the lips, but something in their meaning has quietly shifted. Freedom now means doing what you're told. Love means never questioning. Truth is whatever the leader says it is. At first, you hardly notice. But slowly, word by word, your reality unravels. This is symbolic language control, a form of psychological power so subtle, it can rewrite your mind before you realize what's happened. Language is not just a tool for communication. It is the scaffolding of your thoughts, the lens through which you see the world. The words you use to describe experience are the boundaries of what you can imagine. Home, justice, family, safety. Each one shapes how you interpret your life, your relationships, your very sense of self. When those words are manipulated, so is your reality. At first, it's gentle, almost invisible. A leader, a movement, a group starts using familiar words in unfamiliar ways. Loyalty becomes the highest virtue, but what it means quietly expands. Not just being present, but agreeing, complying, even turning a blind eye to things that trouble you. Freedom is redefined, not as the ability to choose, but as the privilege to serve, to follow, to sacrifice for the group. Love is praised, but now it means devotion to a single cause, or uncritical support of a single person. To love is to obey, to submit, to never doubt. You start to notice the shift when you try to talk about your feelings. The words don't fit anymore. You say you feel uneasy, but the group tells you that's just growing pains, testing your faith, or learning discipline. Doubt becomes negativity. Criticism is disloyalty. Curiosity is rebellion. The vocabulary for dissent shrinks, replaced by slogans, catchphrases, and circular logic. The group's language becomes an echo chamber, sound without substance, questions without space for answers. Over time, your own inner dialogue is invaded. You begin to police your thoughts, rephrasing your discomfort in the group's language, doubting your doubts. If I'm not happy, maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. Maybe I don't understand what love really is. Maybe real freedom is letting go of my selfish desires. You stop asking the questions that once came naturally, not because you are afraid, but because you no longer have the words for them. This is how language becomes a cage. When words lose their original meaning, they become tools for control, not expression. George Orwell called it newspeak, the systematic shrinking and twisting of vocabulary so that rebellion becomes literally unthinkable. If you cannot name injustice, how can you resist it? If you cannot describe your pain, how can you heal it? If you cannot articulate your dreams, how can you chase them? History is full of examples. In totalitarian states, words like peace, order, and unity are used to justify violence and silence. In high-control groups and cults, family means unquestioning loyalty. Truth is what the leader proclaims, and salvation is only possible through conformity. Over time, members lose the ability to describe their experience in any terms but those provided by the group. Even when they suffer, they lack the language to recognize or resist their suffering. It happens in subtle ways in everyday life, too. Companies talk about family, but expect total sacrifice. Political parties praise freedom, but demand uniformity. Social circles claim acceptance, but punish difference. The words are familiar, but their meanings are hollowed out, filled with new rules, new expectations, new chains, and it goes deeper. As language is reshaped, so is reality itself. The group's definitions become your definitions. You start to see outsiders as dangerous, doubters as traitors, questions as threats. The boundaries of your world close in, drawn not with fences but with words. Even your memories get rewritten. What you once called control, you now call care. What you once called abuse, you now call discipline. What you once called loneliness, you now call working on yourself. Eventually, even if you manage to leave, you may find yourself struggling to tell your story. How do you describe the loss of meaning, the theft of language, the way you were made a stranger to your own mind? Survivors of high-control groups often say the hardest part is not just what happened, but the silence that follows, the inability to explain it to others, or even to themselves. To heal, you must learn to reclaim your words, to rebuild your language, to rediscover the meanings that were stolen. But there is hope. Language is resilient. Even after years of distortion, the truth lingers beneath the surface. You can learn, slowly, to name things as they are. Love as kindness, freedom as choice, loyalty as earned, not demanded. You can learn to trust your own words again, to build a vocabulary for your real feelings, real values, real dreams. You can teach yourself and others to listen for the difference between slogans and truth, between obedience and understanding. The first step is noticing. When words feel off, when language starts to itch, pause and ask, whose definition am I using? Who benefits from this meaning? What am I not allowed to say, or even to think? If you feel the ground shifting beneath your language, trust your discomfort. It is the mind's way of fighting for freedom. In the end, to lose your language is to lose your reality, but to reclaim it is to begin the journey home. Hold on to your words. Guard their meanings. For in every act of honest speech, you reassert your freedom, not just to speak, but to see, to feel, to be fully, truly alive. Gaslighted testimonials. You sit in a room surrounded by voices, confident, passionate, unwavering. One after another, people you trust, people who seem just like you, rise to share their stories. They speak with conviction, their eyes shining, their tone unshakable. They swear that miracles happened, that rules of reality were bent or broken, that the impossible unfolded before their eyes. Their stories are so detailed, so emotional, so consistent that you feel a chill in your gut. You remember the same night, the same room, the same event, but your memory is different, mundane, unfinished, full of doubt. You start to wonder if you missed something, if you forgot, if there is something wrong with you. This is the power of gaslighted testimonials, a collective rewriting of reality so persuasive, so relentless, that you begin to doubt the evidence of your own mind. The phenomenon is not new. For centuries, crowds have gathered to witness miracles, supernatural healings, unexplained phenomena. The first witness steps forward, describing something extraordinary, a vision, a healing, a sign. Others follow, their tales growing more vivid, more dramatic, each story amplifying the last. The crowd listens, nods, weeps, and by the end, even skeptics begin to question themselves. Could they really all be lying? Is it possible you are the only one who didn't see? Doubt creeps in, eroding the boundary between reality and suggestion, between memory and myth. Psychologists call this social proof, the tendency to accept something as true if enough people claim it, especially if those people seem sincere, certain, and untroubled by doubt. Social proof is ancient. It helped our ancestors survive. If everyone ran from the fire, you ran too, even if you couldn't see the flames. But in the hands of manipulators, it becomes a tool for warping reality itself. The more testimonies you hear, the more the impossible starts to feel inevitable. Your memory, flexible and fragile, begins to bend. Gaslighting, on the individual level, is when someone systematically denies your reality, insisting you are mistaken, overreacting, or imagining things. But gaslighted testimonials weaponize the collective. It's not just one person, but many, all swearing that black is white, up is down, fantasy is fact. Their certainty is infectious. It leaks into your doubt, filling every crack in your conviction. I must be wrong, you think, if everyone else remembers it differently. This is not just a trick of persuasion. It's a reprogramming of memory itself. Research shows that repeated exposure to false information, especially when delivered with emotion and detail, can implant new memories in the mind of the listener. In classic experiments, volunteers were shown doctored photographs or told vivid stories about events that never happened. Over time, many came to remember those events, complete with emotional resonance and sensory details. The brain, it turns out, values social harmony over factual accuracy. When faced with group consensus, it rewrites the story to fit in. History is littered with examples. In the aftermath of mass events, religious revivals, political rallies, courtroom trials, eyewitness accounts converge, even when they began divergent. In totalitarian regimes, orchestrated confessions and public testimonials create a reality so thick, so impenetrable, that even those who know the truth begin to question it. In cults, the leader's miracles are not just claimed by one or two, but by dozens, then hundreds, each retelling amplifying the legend. Each skeptic slowly converted or exiled. But the ritual thrives in the everyday too. Consider the family that refuses to speak of abuse, the workplace that insists everything is fine when everyone is quietly miserable, the community that swears by a shared myth even as the evidence dissolves. You begin to doubt your feelings, your memories, your instincts. The crowd's certainty drowns out your own quiet truth. Sometimes you push back. You say, "That's not how I remember it." The room turns cold. Faces fall. You are accused of negativity, of disloyalty, of being a troublemaker. The urge to belong, to avoid exile, wins out. You swallow your doubt and start to rehearse the official story. Over time, your mind adapts, smoothing away the friction. Soon you find yourself telling the same story as everyone else, and the crack in reality closes over. The danger is not just in the loss of truth, but in the erosion of self. When you cannot trust your own mind, you become dependent on the group, the authority, the leader. Your compass no longer points inward but outward, spinning in time with every new testimony. You become easier to control, easier to manipulate, easier to keep silent. Is there any way out? The first step is noticing the pattern, recognizing when consensus has become coercion, when testimony has become a script. Notice the moment when your doubt is shamed, your silence rewarded, your questions met with scorn. Remember that memory is not democracy. Truth does not become truer with every raised hand. Protect the fragile flame of your own experience. Write it down. Speak it aloud, even if your voice shakes. Find others who remember as you do, who question, who doubt, who refuse to join the chorus. Gaslighted testimonials are powerful, but not invincible. The truth, once spoken, has its own gravity, its own music, its own stubborn light. In the end, reality is not a majority vote, and the story that matters most is the one you refuse to surrender, even when the whole world remembers it differently. Emotional dependency, loop. It doesn't start with a shout. It begins with a whisper, gentle, even loving, a compliment when you least expect it, a warm smile, a touch of kindness so rare it feels like sunlight after a long winter. At first, you feel special, chosen. The warmth fills old wounds you never knew still hurt. But soon, something changes. The praise vanishes, replaced by silence, cold glances, or a hint of disappointment. You don't know what you did wrong, only that the warmth is gone. The ache is immediate. You'll do anything to bring the sun back. This is the beginning of the emotional dependency loop, a cycle as old as control itself. It's not just for cults or high-control groups. It happens in families, friendships, even workplaces. The logic is brutal. Break someone down, then offer the only relief. Punish, then reward. Withdraw, then embrace. Over time, your emotions stop belonging to you. They start to orbit the whims of another. Their mood's the weather system in which you live. It starts with subtle breaks. Maybe a leader, partner, or authority figure points out your flaws. Not just once, but relentlessly. You're selfish. You're weak. You're not trying hard enough. The message is always cloaked in care. We only want you to improve. We're helping you grow. At first you resist. You defend yourself. But they are persistent, and the criticisms multiply. You begin to doubt your own mind. If so many people agree, maybe they're right. Your self-esteem withers. You become desperate for a sign that you're still good, still lovable, still worth something. Then, when you're lowest, they offer you a lifeline. A rare word of praise, a hug, a look of approval. The rush is dizzying. Relief floods your system, washing away the shame. You want more. You start to chase that feeling, adjusting your words and actions, even your thoughts, to please them. You monitor their every signal. Did they smile? Did they respond to my message? Did they say my name with warmth or distance? The pattern is simple. You feel worthless without their approval, euphoric with it. Your emotions are no longer yours. They belong to the one holding the strings. Over time, your entire life narrows to a single focus, keeping in favor, avoiding rejection. The highs are intoxicating: validation, inclusion, praise, a seat at the leader's side. The lows are unbearable: shame, exclusion, silence, coldness. You become hypersensitive to every nuance in their mood. You anticipate what they want before they ask. You defend them to others, sometimes even to yourself, because their approval is now the air you breathe. This is not love. It is addiction. Psychologists call it intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful method for creating dependency. Casinos use it. Abusers master it. When you can't predict when the reward will come, you work twice as hard for it. You blame yourself for every withdrawal. If only I were better, smarter, more devoted. The loop tightens. Every attempt to escape is met with a fresh cycle. First, you're punished for your independence, accused of betrayal, selfishness, pride. Then, if you repent, you're welcomed back, forgiven, loved again. Each round leaves you weaker, more convinced you need their approval to survive. The outside world starts to fade. You stop trusting your own emotions, your judgment, your history. Friends and family who question the cycle are dismissed or pushed away. They don't understand, you tell yourself. Only here, only with them do I matter. Even your memories are rewritten to fit the pattern. Times you were happy alone now seem empty. Moments of doubt become proof of your own flaws. In cults and high-control groups, the loop is institutionalized. Public confessions, group punishments, sudden ostracism followed by emotional rescue create an atmosphere where no one feels safe except in the leader's good graces. Love and belonging are always conditional. You are trained to doubt your inner voice, to ignore the red flags, to treat the pain as growth. The reward for obedience is temporary. The punishment for disobedience is severe. The rhythm becomes your heartbeat, your only guide. Breaking the cycle is agonizing. The first step is realizing that the highs and lows are not signs of your worth, but tools of control. The second is reclaiming your own emotional weather. You start to name what's happening: manipulation, gaslighting, conditional love. At first, you may grieve for the praise you lose, the belonging that was never real. You may feel lost, unanchored. But over time, something shifts. You learn to listen to your own feelings, to trust your needs, to find worth that isn't purchased with sacrifice or suffering. You may stumble, slip back into the old patterns, seek approval from the very people who hurt you. That's normal. The loop is designed to be hard to escape. But each time you choose yourself, each time you hold fast to your truth in the face of disapproval, the spell weakens. You discover joy in small, genuine connections. You learn to comfort yourself, to cheer your own victories, to weather disappointment without falling apart. The emotional dependency loop is a cage made of longing and fear, but the door, however heavy, is not locked forever. With time, with support, with a fierce commitment to your own truth, you can step outside. You can reclaim your feelings, your mind, your life. You are not what they say. You are not the sum of their moods. You are whole, even when no one else applauds, and your freedom begins the moment you believe you are worthy of love that does not swing on someone else's approval, but is anchored in the quiet strength of your own heart. Incremental boundary erosion. You imagine violation as a dramatic moment, a sudden breach, a clear before and after. But the truth is rarely so clean, so obvious. Most boundaries are not destroyed in a single blow, but in fractions. Thin shavings of selfhood, gentle nudges over invisible lines, so subtle you barely feel it happening. By the time you notice, it's almost too late. You can't remember where the original fence was, or what you were trying so hard to protect. This is incremental boundary erosion, the slow, methodical process by which what once seemed impossible becomes normal, until your own consent is quietly rewritten. It begins with something small, a favor asked when you're tired, a joke that stings a little but you laugh anyway, a minor invasion of privacy, your phone picked up, your diary page glimpsed. It's no big deal, you tell yourself. They mean well. Maybe you protest, but the protest is soft, uncertain. You don't want to be rude, to seem difficult, and so you let it slide. But small transgressions are rarely isolated. The person who crossed the line once comes back. A little bolder this time. They test the ground, watching your reaction. If you say nothing, the line shifts. What was uncomfortable yesterday is tolerated today. What felt invasive last week is now routine. The language changes too. Requests become expectations. Jokes become jabs. Promises are stretched. Excuses made. You adapt, little by little, telling yourself you're just being flexible, just keeping the peace. The psychology of this is ancient. Humans are creatures of habit, of adaptation. When change happens slowly, your brain recalibrates. What was once shocking is now familiar. It's called normalization of deviance. Well, over time, repeated violations lose their sting, their sense of wrongness. You lose your footing, and the idea of drawing a firm line feels impossible, even childish. You begin to question yourself instead. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Manipulators, abusers, cults, and even toxic workplaces know this well. They never demand everything at once. They erode trust, privacy, autonomy in increments. First, they ask for a little more of your time, then a little more access, a little more information, a little more sacrifice. Each concession is so small, so reasonable, that you barely notice the pattern. But the pattern is there. Your boundaries are being moved, step by silent step, until you are standing somewhere you never intended to go. You see this in toxic relationships, where love becomes control, where affection is conditioned on compliance. The first possessive question, "Who were you talking to?" seems harmless, almost flattering. But the questions multiply, the surveillance intensifies, the guilt trips deepen. By the time you see the cage, it's already built around you. You can't remember the moment you stopped feeling free. Or in cults and high-control groups, where rules tighten inch by inch. The first demand might be to change your language, then your clothes, then your relationships outside the group. Financial commitments follow. Public confessions. Loyalty tests. None of it feels like too much, taken alone. But, added together, these small surrenders erase the self you once defended. Dissent feels shameful. Independence feels selfish. By the end, you are far from where you started. So far, you can barely recognize the boundaries you once swore you'd never cross. Even in the workplace, boundary erosion is a silent epidemic. The late-night email, the unpaid overtime, the expectation that you will always be available. You tell yourself it's just this once, just until the crisis is over, just until things settle down. But the crisis never ends, and what was once an exception becomes the rule. Your free time, your energy, your autonomy are slowly consumed, an inch at a time, until you can't remember when you last felt truly off the clock. Why does this work so well? Because confrontation is hard. Because the cost of saying no rises each time you say yes. Because you want to be seen as cooperative, generous, easygoing. Because the idea of causing conflict, of having to explain why you feel violated, is more frightening than the violation itself. So you shrink your boundaries to fit the new reality. You redraw the line, and then you redraw it again. Sometimes you realize what's happening only in hindsight. Maybe you wake up one day and don't recognize yourself. Maybe you try to assert a boundary and find you can't remember how. Maybe someone new enters your life and is shocked at what you tolerate, at how much you've given up. The pain is sharp, not just at the erosion, but at the memory of how fiercely you once defended yourself. But this story doesn't have to end in loss. The first step is noticing the pattern, seeing the increments, the fractions, the slow drift. You name it. Incremental boundary erosion. You allow yourself to feel the anger, the grief, the betrayal. You remember what you once valued, what you once protected. You practice saying no, first quietly, then louder. It's awkward, scary, but it's the only way to reclaim the lines that keep you whole. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to redraw your boundaries, no matter how far they've shifted. The people who love you will respect those lines, not resent them. The groups, the partners, the bosses who rely on erosion to control you will protest, accuse, guilt trip. But this is proof you are reclaiming yourself. Every time you say enough, every time you enforce a limit, you stitch a piece of yourself back together. Incremental boundary erosion is subtle, patient, and powerful. But so are you. Your lines are yours to draw, yours to defend. Even if you've forgotten where they once stood, you can find your way back. Every fraction reclaimed is an act of self-respect, a refusal to be dissolved by someone else's needs. In the end, you remember, what you feared losing was not peace or approval, but the right to stand as yourself, whole, unbroken, and free. And fear-based prophecies. Some warnings are meant to save you, others are crafted to shackle you. Somewhere along the line, the difference blurs. You're told stories of disaster, visions of doom, collapse, suffering that awaits just around the corner unless you comply, obey, submit. If you don't listen, this is what's coming. The images are vivid. The future is a threat. Fear becomes a leash, dressed in the robes of prophecy. This is the cycle of fear-based prophecies, a psychological tool as old as language itself. It appears in every culture, every era, every domain of power. Authority, be it a parent, preacher, teacher, boss, or politician, paints a portrait of looming catastrophe and hands you the brush. Your only escape, you're told, is to follow their path, buy their cure, worship at their altar, silence your doubts. Foresight is twisted into a weapon. The future becomes a cage. In ancient times, oracles and priests mastered this art. The Delphic oracle spoke in riddles, but those riddles shaped kings' decisions. Prophets warned of famine, plague, or invasion, always with the same message: Heed our wisdom, or disaster will find you. The power lay not just in foreseeing events, but in controlling behavior through the currency of fear. Religions, too, wielded fear-based prophecies. Medieval sermons thundered about hellfire and eternal torment, reserved for those who disobeyed or doubted. Sacred texts described floods, plagues, apocalypses, dreadful futures only faith could prevent. The threat was existential, the leash invisible but tight. Spiritual compliance became not just advisable, but necessary for survival. Political regimes used the same tactics. From the Cold War's nuclear nightmares to the propaganda of despots, terrifying futures are dangled before populations. Without us, chaos. Without us, collapse. Without our rule, you and your family will not be safe. In Nazi Germany, fear of imagined conspiracies fueled compliance. In Stalin's USSR, the threat of the enemy within justified purges and terror. In each case, the message was clear. Only obedience keeps the darkness at bay. Families and schools are not immune. If you don't study, you'll become nothing. If you don't listen, you'll end up alone. If you question, you'll regret it. These predictions are rarely true, but their emotional force shapes identity and choices for decades. Children internalize the leash, growing into adults who flinch from risk, who comply out of reflex, who mistrust their own desires. The psychology behind fear-based prophecy is powerful. Humans are hardwired to notice threats, an evolutionary inheritance from ancestors whose survival depended on vigilance. When faced with a dire prediction, your brain lights up in alarm. The amygdala, the fear center, takes over. Rational thought narrows. Doubt and dissent fade, replaced by the urge to flee, fight, or, most often, obey. Social psychologists call this anticipated regret. The idea is simple. If you're made to imagine a horrible future, you'll do nearly anything to avoid the shame, pain, or disaster described. The more vivid the warning, the stronger the leash. Over time, even if the prophecy never comes true, the fear lingers. You avoid forbidden paths, silence forbidden thoughts, and cling to those who claim to hold the keys to safety. Advertising and media amplify these dynamics. Watch enough news, and you'll see a parade of fear-based prophecies. Economic collapse, crime waves, technological apocalypse, each paired with a product, a politician, or a plan that promises protection. Buy now, vote this way, give up that right, just don't let the future they warn about become real. But the most insidious effect is psychological. When fear becomes your compass, your world shrinks. You mistrust change, stifle curiosity, and seek safety above growth. Your imagination, meant for wonder and creation, becomes hijacked by visions of what could go wrong. You accept limits, swallow doubts, and eventually forget that a future of your own making was ever possible. Whole generations can be shackled this way. Look at history's moral panics, from witch hunts to red scares to health crazes, where fear of an impending disaster led millions to police each other, silence dissent, and turn on those who dared to imagine something different. The leash is powerful because it is self-reinforcing. Once you accept the prophecy, you begin to see danger everywhere, and compliance feels like wisdom. Escaping fear-based prophecies is neither easy nor safe. It requires a willingness to look at the future, not through the eyes of those who would control you, but through your own. It means asking, whose vision is this? Who benefits if I am afraid? What possibilities are hidden behind the curtain of doom? Therapists help people name and challenge these predictions. Is the fear based on real evidence, or is it an echo of someone else's anxiety? Are you being protected or manipulated? True foresight involves risk, uncertainty, and courage. The willingness to walk into the unknown without guarantees, to accept that bad things can happen, but that your life is more than an effort to dodge disaster. Communities, too, can break the cycle. When people gather to question received wisdom, to share hopes as well as warnings, to envision possible futures beyond compliance, the leash begins to weaken. Genuine dialogue replaces one-way warnings. Hope is restored as a compass, balancing caution with possibility. So, next time you hear a terrifying vision of the future, whether from a pulpit, a podium, a parent, or a screen, pause and look for the leash. Ask who holds it and why. Notice how your body reacts and choose whether to follow or to question. The future is always uncertain, but it should never be used as a weapon to keep you small, silent, or afraid. In the end, the greatest act of courage may be to unfasten the leash of fear, to imagine for yourself what could be, and to walk forward, free, uncertain, and alive, into a future that belongs to you. Inner enemy projection. Imagine waking up every morning with a knot in your stomach, a quiet dread, a private anxiety, a fear you can't quite name. You try to shake it off, but the group you belong to, the leader you follow, the doctrine you're learning, all have an explanation. Your doubts, your worries, your persistent discomfort aren't just normal human struggles. They're evidence of something darker lurking inside you. Those are your inner demons, they whisper. That's your enemy within, and only we know how to save you. At first, maybe it's comforting. It's easier to believe that your pain is a sign of infection than a sign of oppression. Your doubts are not yours. They're symptoms, not signals. You're told, everyone feels this way before transformation. Only those who persevere can be cleansed. And so, you try harder, suppressing the doubts, fighting the feelings, policing your own mind for any trace of the so-called enemy. Your inner landscape becomes a battleground, one you can never truly win, because the weapons, the rules, the very definition of victory, all belong to them. This is inner enemy projection, a psychological trap as old as power itself. It works by convincing you that your natural, healthy, even necessary reactions to stress or control are signs of a moral or spiritual failing inside you. Instead of trusting your discomfort as a warning sign, you learn to mistrust yourself. Doubt becomes sin. Questioning becomes betrayal. Fear becomes evidence of your own brokenness. Groups, cults, and controlling relationships use this tactic because it's so effective. As long as you're convinced that the real threat is inside you, you'll never question the external system that causes your pain. The leader, the doctrine, the rules are always pure. If you're unhappy, if you're afraid, if something feels wrong, the problem is you. And, here's the masterstroke, the only solution is obedience, confession, and ever deeper dependence on the one who claims the cure. Maybe you've heard the language. You need to work harder to purify yourself. That's just your negativity talking. If you feel anger or doubt, it means you need more guidance. The group offers rituals, confessions, counseling, exorcisms, ways to cast out the so-called inner enemy. Each one ties you tighter to their authority. Each one deepens your dependence. Each one makes you more likely to blame yourself the next time the pain returns. It's a vicious cycle. The more you try to cast out the demon, the more you suppress your own voice, your own instincts, your own warning bells. Every time you doubt, every time you long for something outside, every time you question, you're told to double down, confess more, serve more, trust more. You're never allowed to ask the dangerous question, what if my feelings are trying to protect me? This is not just a trick of cults or extreme groups. You see it in families where parents label a child's discomfort as rebellion, in workplaces where burnout is treated as a personal weakness, not a system problem. You see it in relationships where one partner claims to know what's wrong with the other's heart, offering themselves as the only cure. The message is always the same. Don't listen to yourself. Listen to us. We'll tell you what's wrong inside you, and only we can fix it. But beneath the surface, something resists. Even as you struggle to comply, a small part of you aches for escape. A voice whispers, maybe this doubt is a signal. Maybe this fear is information. Maybe my pain is pointing to something real. This is the voice they fear, the part of you that can't be fully controlled, that remembers what freedom and safety feel like, that longs for your own authority over your inner world. Escaping this trap is hard, not just because of the control, but because it turns your own mind against you. When you start to pull away, guilt floods in. I must be weak, sinful, broken for wanting out. You may even sabotage your own attempts to leave, convinced you'll fail without their guidance. The residue of the group's language lingers, making you doubt the only thing that could ever save you, your own truth. But healing is possible. It starts with the radical act of listening to yourself, treating your doubts and fears not as enemies, but as signals. If you feel anxiety, ask, what is this telling me about my situation? If you feel pain, ask, is this my fault or am I being harmed? If you feel guilt, ask, whose standards am I trying to meet? Who benefits from my shame? This is the slow work of reclaiming your mind from those who taught you to see yourself as the enemy. You may need help. A therapist, a trusted friend, a survivors group. People who will not diagnose your discomfort, but honor it. People who know that doubt is not disease, and that fear, sometimes, is a life-saving reflex. It takes time to learn that your inner world is not a battlefield, but a compass. The feelings you were taught to demonize may be the very ones that guide you home. If you've been told that only they can exorcise your pain, remember, their power depends on your belief that you are broken. You are not. Your mind may be hurt, your heart may be weary, but your doubts, fears, and pain are not the enemy. They are messengers, reminders that your truth is your own. The real danger is surrendering that truth to someone else's hands. So the next time someone tells you your inner struggles are proof of a demon, a flaw, or a traitor within, ask yourself, what if this is the healthiest, bravest part of me trying to get free? And what if the only exorcism you really need is to trust your own voice, louder, clearer, and more honest than theirs ever was? Obedience equals enlightenment. You enter the hall searching for answers, a deeper truth, a glimpse of the divine, a moment of connection that will make sense of everything you've endured. You come with questions, with doubts, with a mind hungry for meaning. But almost immediately, you sense the current in the air. The teachings are clear, the path is narrow, and the highest praise is reserved not for those who wonder, but for those who obey. Welcome to a world where obedience equals enlightenment, where the spiritual prize is promised not to the seekers, but to the followers, and thinking itself becomes a danger to your soul. It starts subtly. You are told that humility is the first step to wisdom, that the way to enlightenment is to empty yourself, to submit, to silence your inner voice and make room for the truth delivered from above. The stories echo through sermons and sacred texts. The disciple who doubted was lost. The questioner was punished. The obedient was rewarded with vision, grace, even immortality. You begin to notice the hierarchy, not just of roles, but of virtues. Curiosity is suspect. Critical thinking is prideful. Doubt is a disease. Only surrender, only faith, only unquestioning trust can bring you to the promised land. The teachers are careful. They cloak their commands in poetry and kindness. Be still and listen. Have faith, even when you do not understand. Blessed are those who obey, for they shall see God. There are mantras and rituals, each one designed to calm your restless mind, to hush the voice that asks, why? Slowly, obedience becomes the currency of spiritual progress. Every time you silence a question, you are praised for your wisdom. Every time you accept a paradox, you are told you are growing closer to enlightenment. The lessons are repeated again and again until obedience feels like virtue and thinking feels like a threat. You watch those who refuse to fall in line. They are pitied, sometimes shamed, sometimes cast out. Their hearts are closed. Their pride is a wall. They are lost in the mind and cannot feel the truth. You begin to fear your own thoughts, to suspect your own questions, to believe that your longing to understand is the very thing keeping you from grace. The spiritual path narrows. Doubt becomes taboo, skepticism a stain, independence a sin. The lesson is clear. Do not trust your mind. Trust only those who have climbed higher, those who hold the keys, those who stand between you and the light. Across history, the story repeats. In temples, in churches, in cults, in self-help seminars masquerading as modern enlightenment, the structure is always the same. A leader or doctrine claims exclusive access to truth. The followers are encouraged to surrender their judgment, to exchange agency for belonging, to conflate submission with transcendence. Sometimes, the obedience demanded is absolute, a code of dress, a schedule of prayer, rules about what you may eat, whom you may love, even what thoughts you are allowed to think. To break the rules is to endanger not just your place in the group, but your soul, your future, your very worth as a human being. This obedience is sometimes rewarded with euphoria, a spiritual high, a sense of certainty and purpose that can be intoxicating. The rituals, the music, the communal affirmation all combine to give you the feeling that you are on the right path. Every time you let go of doubt, every time you agree, every time you follow without question, you are rewarded with belonging, with safety, with the praise of the group. You feel yourself lifted, buoyed by the collective certainty. free from the burden of choice. It feels like enlightenment, but it is something else. Beneath the surface, something vital is lost. When obedience becomes the measure of spiritual progress, thinking is transformed from a gift into a liability. The mind is painted as the enemy, a source of confusion and pride. But without thought, there is no true seeking, no real transformation, only imitation, only the quiet extinction of the self. You begin to police your own mind, to recoil from forbidden questions, to shame yourself for the instincts that once made you human. The journey is no longer yours, but a carefully scripted walk along the boundaries set by others. Psychology has a name for this: external locus of control. Your sense of truth, your moral compass, your perception of the sacred is shifted from within yourself to an external authority. You learn to mistrust your own experience, to look outward for every answer, to measure your worth in how well you conform. You become easier to lead, easier to please, easier to keep in line. You may feel safe, but the price is your own voice. Yet the greatest spiritual teachers, the wisest philosophers, the prophets who changed the world, rarely asked for blind obedience. They urged their followers to question, to wrestle with paradox, to seek their own answers. The true journey to enlightenment is not a march in step with the crowd, but a lonely walk through the wilderness of doubt, a struggle to hold on to what is real and let go of what is not. Thinking is not a threat to the soul, it is the way the soul learns to see. But the obedience equals enlightenment trap is persistent, seductive. It offers easy answers, comfort, a sense of certainty in an uncertain world. It promises that the way to transcendence is through surrender, not through struggle. And for a while it may feel like enough. But eventually you may find yourself empty, lost, cut off from the voice inside that once asked why and what if. And how do I know? You do not have to choose between belonging and thinking. You do not have to silence your questions to earn love, respect, or spiritual peace. The truest enlightenment is not found in obedience, but in the courage to ask, to doubt, to risk being wrong, and to keep seeking anyway. The soul is not a child to be led, but a fire to be kindled, a fire that burns brighter every time you dare to think for yourself. Obedience may buy you a place in the circle, but the real prize is reserved for those who walk beyond it, who refuse to trade their mind for easy certainty, who choose to be seekers, even if the path is lonely, even if the answers never come. That is the paradox. Only when you risk everything, only when you question even the holiest of rules, can you discover a light that is truly your own. Illusion of choice. You believe you are making choices. You are shown a menu of paths: retreat or advance, confess or remain silent, attend this event or that one, follow one rule or another. The group, the leader, the system, always frames it as freedom. You decide. It's up to you. You are praised for your autonomy, your discernment, your ability to choose the life you want. But what if every option leads back to the same place? What if, beneath the surface, the choices are just mirrors in a maze, reflections that all point you in a single direction? Deeper control, tighter bonds, greater surrender to the system that presented the choices in the first place. This is the illusion of choice, a psychological sleight of hand that makes obedience feel like agency and commitment feel like liberation. It starts with small decisions, dressed in the language of empowerment. Maybe you're invited to pick which group retreat you want to attend, which book you'd like to study, which spiritual practice to try. On the surface, you are being honored with trust, allowed to shape your own journey. The group leader, the manager, the mentor smiles warmly. It's your path, they say, but look closer. No matter which retreat you choose, you'll be surrounded by the same people, hearing the same ideas, subject to the same subtle pressures. No matter which practice you embrace, the core message is always the same: belong, submit, align yourself more closely with the values of the group. Rules operate the same way. You're told you can select your own structure, your own accountability system. Want to wake up at 5 or 6, fast on Tuesdays or Thursdays, set your own goals or follow the prescribed ones? It doesn't matter. Each option funnels you back to the same outcome: more of your time, energy, and identity entangled with the system. Any deviation from the program is not real rebellion, but a different route back to the same finish line. The more options you're offered, the more you feel in control, even as the walls around you close in. Psychologists call this bounded choice, the design of options so that all outcomes ultimately benefit the one who frames them. Cults and high-control groups are masters of this game. You may be given the choice to leave the group at any time, but the consequences, loss of community, shame, fear, existential dread, are so severe that departure is unthinkable. You may choose to confess your doubts, to undergo more training, to recommit after a crisis, but each of these choices deepens your investment, binds you tighter, makes the idea of ever leaving feel like a betrayal of everything you are. Even in the workplace, in families, in relationships, the illusion persists. You can talk to me about anything, says the controlling partner, but every time you do, your honesty is twisted, weaponized, turned into another reason to conform. You can set your own hours, says the employer, but every schedule leads to the same outcome: exhaustion, dependence, a sense that you owe more than you're allowed to take. The system is designed so that every path circles back to the center, the locus of power. You move, you act, you choose, but the destination never changes. This illusion is so powerful because it preys on the deepest human desire, the need for agency, for self-authorship. We are wired to resist domination, to push back against tyranny. The trick is to disguise control as collaboration, to mask the limits with the language of liberation. Every time you select from a set of approved options, you reinforce the authority of the system itself. You internalize its logic. You teach yourself to ask, which of these is right for me, rather than, who decided these were the only options? The result is a kind of psychological entrapment. You feel responsible for your own commitment. If you struggle or suffer, you blame yourself. I chose this. I wanted this. If I'm unhappy, I must be the problem. The more you buy into the illusion, the more shame you feel for any desire to leave. The system becomes invisible because every wall has a door, and every door opens into another room in the same house. Sometimes, the illusion becomes painfully clear. You notice that no matter which way you turn, the outcome is the same. The choices offered are all in service of the same authority, the same ideology, the same relentless need for loyalty and control. You begin to wonder, what would real freedom look like? Could you walk away, say no, design your own options from scratch? Or has the system already shaped you so deeply that you no longer remember what freedom felt like before you entered the maze? Breaking free from the illusion of choice is difficult, but not impossible. It begins with the smallest act of awareness, asking yourself who benefits from the options in front of you, whose interests are served, what paths are missing from the menu. It means daring to imagine choices that aren't offered, to consider refusals, alternatives, blank spaces. It means questioning not only what you pick, but why you are being asked to pick at all. In the end, the illusion of choice is not about what you do, but about who gets to define the field you play on. Real freedom is not the ability to pick from a list, but the power to write your own list, or to reject the whole premise and walk away. The systems that fear this kind of freedom will always try to keep you circling, always moving, always choosing, but never, ever escaping. Recognize the maze for what it is. Find the courage to seek the door that isn't shown, to trust your own sense of direction, and to remember that agency begins the moment you stop asking what you're allowed to want and start asking what you truly need. Cleansing through self-blame. You stumble, life grows difficult, a relationship cracks, you lose your job, your hopes wither on the vine. Somewhere, someone, or maybe an entire community tells you it's your fault. Not the system, not the doctrine, not the person who harmed you. The blame circles and finds its mark on your own heart. You are told that if you suffer, it means you didn't believe hard enough, try hard enough, pray hard enough, conform enough. Every misfortune is a signal, not of the world's cruelty, but of your own unworthiness. This is cleansing through self-blame, a psychological cycle that keeps you quiet, compliant, and searching for fault only within. It's a powerful form of control, older than written language, sharper than any chain. In every era, leaders, institutions, and even families have harnessed self-blame as a tool, not just to avoid accountability, but to rewire how you see yourself. It begins with a simple message. If you're struggling, it's a test of faith, loyalty, work ethic, or purity. If you fail, the only solution is to look deeper within, to scour your soul for hidden sins, flaws, or doubts, to root out every last trace of rebellion. The more you suffer, the more you are told you need to cleanse yourself. Religions have refined this mechanism for centuries. In medieval Christianity, when harvests failed or plagues swept through towns, the answer was not to question leaders or policies, but to confess more, pray harder, fast, flagellate, and repent. Suffering was proof of sin. Prosperity meant God was pleased. Hardship meant God was punishing you for some hidden fault. Communities turned inward, policing each other for insufficient piety, while those in power stood above blame. In some Eastern traditions, karma was twisted into a justification for suffering. If you were sick, poor, or marginalized, it was because of past life transgressions. Your pain was your penance. The powerful remained blameless. The downtrodden learned to bow their heads in shame. In modern prosperity gospel movements, believers are told that wealth and health are the fruits of unwavering faith. If illness or poverty strikes, the only explanation is spiritual failure. Self-blame becomes a closed loop, a doctrine immune to evidence, endlessly self-reinforcing. But the mechanism is not limited to religion. In families, children are told that if they are bullied, it's because they're too sensitive. If they're lonely, it's because they're not likable. If they're abused, it's because they misbehaved. In toxic workplaces, employees are urged to own every failure, to never question management, to see every setback as a flaw in their mindset or attitude. The doctrine is the same. Cleanse yourself of doubt and things will improve. If they don't, cleanse harder. Psychologists call this internalized oppression. Over time, the victim adopts the worldview of the abuser, turning all anger, grief, and confusion inward. The pain of self-blame becomes oddly comforting. It gives you a sense of control, a way to explain the unexplainable. If only you were better, smarter, purer, then maybe the world would love you, or at least leave you in peace. The cycle is brutal. The more you blame yourself, the more powerless you become, and the more you look for new faults to fix. History is littered with examples. In authoritarian regimes, citizens are taught that loyalty is never enough. Any discontent, any failure, any deviation is proof of internal weakness or ideological impurity. Public confessions, self-criticism sessions, and even forced apologies are used to purify the group by purging bad elements, not through justice or compassion, but through endless self-accusation. The system is never at fault. If you suffer, it's because you are impure. Even in contemporary self-help culture, the trap remains. Manifest your dreams, visualize success, attract abundance. If you're unhappy, you didn't try hard enough, meditate long enough, or repeat your affirmations with enough conviction. External obstacles are dismissed. Systemic injustice is ignored. The answer is always within. Find the flaw and fix it. If you fail, you simply haven't cleansed yourself completely. The toll of this doctrine is heavy. People caught in cycles of self-blame experience depression, anxiety, and profound loneliness. They hide their struggles, fearing judgment or rejection. Relationships suffer as one partner absorbs all blame to keep the peace. Children grow up doubting their worth, their intuition, their right to ask for help. Over time, a kind of emotional numbness sets in. You stop protesting, stop questioning, stop believing you deserve better. The act of blaming yourself becomes a ritual, a grim sacrament offered to invisible judges. But there is a way out, and it begins with seeing the system for what it is. A way to keep you compliant, disconnected, and endlessly busy with self-policing. The world is not just. Not every suffering is earned. Not every failure is a sign of inner defect. Sometimes pain is a message, not about your flaws, but about what's broken around you. Therapists help people unlearn these patterns by teaching self-compassion, by guiding them to see the larger context, by gently challenging the reflex to blame and cleanse. Recovery means learning to grieve losses without self-hatred, to question unfairness without shame, to hold yourself accountable with love rather than punishment. Ask yourself, whose voice is it that calls you unworthy? Who benefits if you turn every disappointment inward? What would it mean to honor your pain as real, as valid, not as proof of sin, but as evidence that something needs to change? To cleanse through self-blame is to walk in circles, forever seeking a purity that can never be found. To break the cycle is to risk anger, grief, and uncertainty. but also to reclaim the possibility of self-respect, justice, and connection. You are not broken because you suffer. You are not unworthy because you struggle. The first act of freedom is to lay down the whip of self-blame and look outward, to see the world as it is, and to dare to believe that not every burden is yours to carry alone. Eternal gratitude training. Imagine the moment you first felt rescued, when someone stepped in, offered you safety, relief, a way out of chaos, or the promise of happiness you'd been searching for. Maybe you were desperate, vulnerable, broken by the world. Maybe your dreams had faded, your relationships fractured, your hope running dry. Then came the leader, the mentor, the healer, the group, offering you exactly what you needed at exactly the right moment. Gratitude flooded in. You felt saved, seen, chosen. But what began as relief slowly transformed into a weight you could not put down. Welcome to eternal gratitude training, where what you're thankful for becomes what you can never stop owing. It starts with a gift. In the beginning, you're encouraged to see every good thing, your survival, your joy, your new sense of peace, as something you received, not something you found within yourself. You were lost, but we found you. You were broken, but we healed you. You had no purpose, but we gave you one. And in your heart, it's true. The leader or group feels like a lifeline. The gratitude is real, pure, overwhelming. You want to thank them, serve them, give back. But gratitude, when weaponized, is a subtle form of control. Each kindness becomes a debt, each comfort a binding. You're reminded again and again that you would not be here without their intervention, their wisdom, their sacrifice. Where would you be without us? Who else would take you in? Remember who saved you. These phrases, repeated over time, become part of your story. You start to believe that your happiness, your healing, your very right to exist, is contingent on continued loyalty. Gratitude shifts from a feeling to an obligation. You owe them, and you owe them forever. The training intensifies in ways that are almost invisible. Whenever you feel doubt, exhaustion, or even simple disagreement, you're reminded of your debt. How can you be ungrateful after all we've done? Questioning is a betrayal. If you loved us, you'd remember who you were before. Slowly, guilt creeps in. You begin to distrust your own wants, your own needs, your own instincts. Every desire for independence or honesty feels like an act of selfishness, an insult to your benefactors. Some leaders demand open displays of gratitude, praise in public, gifts, acts of service, endless testimonials about how much they have changed your life. Others are more subtle. They foster a culture where members constantly compete to be the most grateful, the most devoted, the most willing to sacrifice for the cause. Gratitude is measured, weighed, and never found sufficient. No matter how much you give, it's never enough. You may notice how every celebration turns into a tribute. Every story of personal growth circles back to the leader's wisdom. Every happy moment is used as proof of their greatness. Your friends, your family, even strangers are told, "This is the one who saved me." But in private, the feeling curdles. Your gratitude becomes a chain. You feel guilty for wanting space, afraid to express frustration, terrified of seeming ungrateful. You replay the low point of your past over and over, reminding yourself how much worse things were before, even if the present is full of its own pain. Eternal gratitude training isn't limited to cults or high-control groups. You see it in families, where a parent reminds a child of all the sacrifices made, using guilt to demand obedience. You see it in workplaces, where a boss takes credit for your career, expecting loyalty in exchange for every opportunity. You see it in relationships, where love is traded for submission, and past kindness is used as leverage against present needs. The logic is always the same. You owe me because I gave you what you could not give yourself. But this logic is a lie. The most profound gratitude should lead to freedom, not servitude. True mentors rejoice when their students surpass them. Real healers celebrate when their patients outgrow the need for their care. But those who demand eternal gratitude fear your independence, because it threatens their hold on you. And so, the debt grows. You shrink your dreams, mute your voice, sideline your desires. You become a caretaker for their ego, a guardian of their myth, a servant to a cause that has replaced your own. You measure your worth by your gratitude, and your gratitude by your willingness to give up more and more of yourself. The outside world, with its messy, complicated reciprocal relationships, feels dangerous, inferior, even blasphemous. Who would risk losing the source of all happiness? Who would dare be ungrateful? But inside, a quiet ache lingers. The gratitude that once felt luminous has turned heavy, suffocating. You miss the simple joys of giving and receiving, the feeling of earning your own peace, the dignity of being seen as an equal. Sometimes, in your private moments, you remember the person you were before you were rescued, the strengths, the desires, the courage that brought you to the edge of change in the first place. You wonder, was it really all a gift? Did I have nothing to offer? Was I truly so powerless before them? Healing begins with reclaiming your own story. You can honor the gifts you received while refusing to let them become a lifelong chain. You can express gratitude and still set boundaries. You can thank your benefactor and still walk away. True freedom is knowing that survival, joy, and peace are your birthright, not something you must pay for forever with your soul. So if you feel the weight of eternal gratitude pressing you down, remember, you are not ungrateful for wanting more than to serve. You do not owe anyone your silence, your loyalty, or your life, just because they helped you once. The deepest act of gratitude is to live fully, to honor the gift by becoming all you were meant to be, not by shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. The debt they claim is infinite, but your life is not. You are allowed to thank them and then move on. You are allowed to outgrow the story of being saved. You are allowed at last to be grateful for yourself,